Chapter 246. Apparently, Changxing Tianzuan intended to rope in Yi Xian. After all, there were not many primordial unity Xian immortals in the celestial court. Changxing Tianzuan was delighted to have Yi Xian join the Chanism. Unfortunately, Yi Xian would not join the Chanism. He had just entered the Earth Immortal realm and did not fully understand the situation there. Even if he wanted to join a certain orthodoxy, he would have to think carefully. Yi Xian purposely pretended to be in a difficult position, causing Heavenly Sovereign Changsheng to instantly wake up. He clearly knew that he was a bit rash. The two of them weren't too familiar with each other, so how could such a big matter be easily decided? Fellow Taoist, please don't blame me. I was too reckless. But you can think about it. Fellow Taoist, you might not be familiar with the current three realms. Take a look at Erlang Sheng and Neza, the great god of the sea. They are all third-generation disciples of the Chan school. If you join the Chan school, your future achievements will definitely not be inferior to those two junior brothers. Heavenly Lord Changsheng said smugly. Yi Xian knew that Changxing Tianzuan was telling the truth even without the introduction. In the three realms, only Buddhism and the Chanism were powerful. The Jie sect had already fallen in the War of the Gods. There were many monster kings in the Earth Immortal realm. Each of them had a deep relationship with Buddhism and Taoism. The two sat down and discussed Taoism, no longer mentioning the orthodoxy. From Taoism to Changxing Tiandao, both of them expressed their own opinions. They really regretted not having met each other earlier. No matter what Taoism Changxing Tianzuan proposed, he could verify it with Yi Xian. This also made Changxing Tianzuan more convinced that Yi Xian must be an ancient golden immortal. Otherwise, how could he discuss Taoism with him for so long? However, Changxing Tianzuan did not know that Yi Xian cultivated the immortal scripture. This scripture was something that existed since the beginning of the world. It was easy for him to discuss it with a primordial unity golden immortal. When the two of them were discussing Tao, Heavenly Lord Changsheng introduced Yi Xian to him in a subtle way. He tried his best to get Yi Xian to join his lineage. However, Yi Xian avoided the important points and did not directly agree to his request. The Moon Palace's Moon Fairy? Unknowingly, Yi Xian had led the topic to the Fairy of Guanghan. This also stunned the longevity immortal venerable, and a wisp of infatuation flashed through his eyes. Then, he quickly came to his senses and smiled flatteringly to cover up his ugly absent-mindedness. Fairy Guanghan lives alone in the Moon Palace. Other than the Immortality Peach Banquet and the Ginseng Fruit Banquet established by the earthly immortal ancestor, I've seen her twice from afar. Fellow Taoist, may I know why you are asking about this? Heavenly Premier Longevity asked in puzzlement. Yi Xian smiled lightly and said, It's just that I've heard that Fairy Guanghan is the #1 fairy in the three realms. However, I've never seen her before, so I'm naturally curious. Hearing Yi Xian's explanation, Heavenly Premier Longevity nodded slowly and then advised, Fellow Taoist, listen to me. It's better if you don't meet Fairy Guanghan. In the future, when you pass by the Moon Palace, you have to take a detour. Oh, Yi Xian's eyes narrowed, and he smiled and said, Fellow Taoist, what do you mean? Could it be that Fairy Guanghan can eat people? Heavenly Premier Longevity shook his head and smiled bitterly. Fairy Guanghan's beauty is irresistible. Although she can't eat people, some people have feelings for her. Look at the Jade Emperor, the ruler of the three realms. His cultivation is unfathomable, and he was once obsessed with him for thousands of years. Look at Sage Erlang. Every 100 years, he would bring thousands of flowers to the Moon Palace. There are also too many powerful people who yearn for Fairy Guanghan, but can't get her. 10,000 years ago, Yuan Mo was a primordial unity golden immortal. He was an existence that brought chaos to the three realms. When he heard of Fairy Guanghan's beauty, he personally stepped into the Moon Palace. Guess what happened in the end? Heavenly Premier Longevity smiled bitterly and shook his head. What happened? Yi Xian narrowed his eyes and asked. Yuan Mo was too arrogant. He thought that he could do whatever he wanted in the three realms, and that the immortals of the celestial court couldn't do anything to him. In fact, he didn't know that it was because the real powerful people didn't want to suppress him. However, when he stepped into the Moon Palace, He completely angered these people. Heavenly Premier Longevity's eyes were a little dazed as he said this. He continued, "That day, the situation at the mouth of the Guanjiang River changed. The war god of the three realms, Yang Jian, wielded a three-pointed, double-edged sword and used his Dharma form to kill his way into the 33rd heaven from the Earth Immortal world. He went straight into the Moon Palace. With just one slash, he blasted Yuan Mo down to the heaven realm. He even chased him for hundreds of millions of miles and almost killed Yuan Mo. Yuan Mo fled pathetically. Although he escaped from Yang Jian, some immortals seized the opportunity when Yuan Mo was seriously injured and sealed him in the reverse passage. That's why the so-called ancient war happened. Therefore, I would like to advise fellow Taoists that if you pass by the Moon Palace in the future, you must take a detour. If you make some people unhappy, no one can save you even if you join the Chan sect." Heavenly Premier Longevity spoke tirelessly. He was also implicitly reminding Yi Xian not to have any thoughts about the fairy of the Moon Palace. This was because Yi Xian couldn't afford to pay the price. Unfortunately, Yi Xian's expression didn't change at all in the face of Heavenly Premier Longevity's warning. No one knew what he was thinking. Yi Xian had to go to the Moon Palace, and the sooner the better. This was because not only did he want to send the Moon Goddess to the Moon Palace, but he also wanted to use the fairy of the Moon Palace to achieve some of the things he wanted to do. The two chatted for half a day. Yi Xian also stood up and bid farewell. When he left the Longevity Immortal Palace, Heavenly Premier Longevity's smile was no longer there. He looked at Yi Xian's departing figure, and a thoughtful look flashed across his eyes. This Taoist is too shrewd. He's definitely not an ordinary person, Heavenly Premier Longevity muttered to himself. After leaving the Longevity Immortal Palace, Yi Xian rode a cloud and left. However, Yi Xian didn't know that an immortal official had already informed the Jade Emperor of his whereabouts. Obviously, the Jade Emperor had been watching his every word and action. In the chaotic Cloud Palace, Yi Xian sat cross-legged. His face was gloomy. When he opened and closed his eyes, there was a flicker of blood-red light. Yi Xian had obtained a lot of useful information from Heavenly Premier Longevity, especially about the fairy of the Moon Palace. It was obvious that she was a taboo in the three realms. If one didn't have great abilities, they would probably suffer an unimaginable calamity if they offended her. Ha! Suddenly, Yi Xian's lips curled into a cold smile. He muttered, "Is it a femme fatale or a femme fatale? Let me, Yi Xian, see just how charming you, the legendary fairy Guanghan are." Buzz! Yi Xian formed a seal with both hands. The Tai Immortal light spread out and covered his body. A forbidden secret technique was also used by Yi Xian. Primordial Spirit Void. These four simple words came from the chaotic Cloud Palace. Yi Xian merged into the void. His aura was restrained to the extreme. He then took a step forward and suddenly disappeared from the chaotic Cloud Palace. The direction he went was the forbidden area of the Celestial Court, the Moon Palace where the fairy of the Moon Palace lived alone. Chapter 247. In the vast heaven realm, the stars were spread out. In the 33 levels of heaven, cloud bridges rose and connected to each other. There were also auspicious clouds and beautiful lights. From time to time, there were heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals patrolling. There were also many fairies carrying flower baskets in the heaven realm. Yi Xian used the primordial spirit void secret technique and walked quietly in the heaven realm. However, his aura was restrained to the extreme. He did not dare to leak out the slightest bit, as he was afraid that he would attract the attention of the powerful figures with remarkable powers. Yi Xian wasn't arrogant in the slightest. He was well aware of his own capabilities. Although he relied on his potential to become a grand Unity Xian immortal, just this heaven realm alone was filled with hidden dragons and crouching tigers. If he made a mistake, he would really be in danger of dying. The primordial spirit void secret technique was a forbidden secret technique. Although this technique was extremely strange, Yi Xian was not completely confident that he could not be discovered by anyone. Fortunately, Yi Xian did not encounter any accidents along the way. He also saw the outline of the Moon Palace in the distance. The Moon Palace was also called the Moon Palace. It was the Taoist field of the Moon Fairy. However, the moon palace was different. It was not located in the 33 levels of heaven. Its Taoist field was built on the moon star. Yes, it was the moon star. Since ancient times, the great witch demon tribulation had shattered the primordial world and turned it into the 3 realms of heaven and earth. Stars filled the sky and hung in the 33 heavens of the heaven realm. The lunar star had also become the Taoist field of the fairy of Guanghan. The hazy moonlight poured down in torrents. When Yi Xian stepped on the moon star, he saw a palace made of white jade standing in the distance. There was also a Tongtian osmanthus tree rooted at the side, emitting auspicious qi and immortal light. The moon palace? Yi Xian's eyes narrowed. Without any hesitation, he took a step forward and quietly appeared in front of the Guanghan palace. The world was silent and there was no sound. There was no sound coming from the moon palace. Other than the Tongtian osmanthus tree swaying under the moonlight, the entire moon palace gave off a cold and indifferent feeling. Yi Xian narrowed his eyes and restrained his aura to the extreme. He turned into a ray of light and sneaked into the moon palace. In the moon palace, the 4 jade pillars and the hazy moonlight could be seen at a glance. Celestial light crisscrossed as the moonlight scattered down. Yi Xian followed his footsteps and quietly snuck towards the back of the hall. He'd already heard the sound of water coming from the back of the hall. It had to be said that the primordial spirit void technique was very strange. Not only did it allow Yi Xian to sneak into the moon palace, but it also allowed him to sneak into the moon palace without anyone knowing. When Yi Xian stepped into the back of the hall, the scene that followed caused him to freeze on the spot. Even the aura around him became extremely chaotic. In the rear hall, there was a celestial pond that was steaming with misty water vapor. A bamboo curtain made the celestial pond faintly discernible. However, there was a woman in the celestial pond washing herself. The clear water flowed past every inch of her skin, giving off a hazy and illusory sense of beauty. It was faintly discernible and caused one's imagination to run wild. Although Yi Xian could not see the woman's face due to the bamboo curtain and the water vapor, when she raised her arms, it brought out a large expanse of spring. Her towering, exquisite, and round breasts swayed slightly, as if they could turn one into a beast and do something that would anger both men and gods. Damn it! With just one glance, Yi Xian's mind was shaken and his blood was boiling. He cursed in his heart and tried his best to suppress his turbulent emotions. Needless to say, the woman in the celestial pond was undoubtedly the Moon Palace fairy. Yi Xian happened to see the Moon Palace fairy bathing and saw a large expanse of her body. This made Yi Xian unsure if he should retreat. Who is it? All of a sudden, a cold voice came from the celestial pond. Endless moonlight covered the celestial pond, and a white palace gauze covered her exquisite and mysterious body. Not a single trace of her body was exposed. Oh no! Yi Xian cursed himself for being too stupid. Just now, when his mind was in a mess, there was a flaw in the primordial spirit void mystic technique, and a trace of his aura was exposed. Obviously, the Moon Palace fairy had discovered it. Rumble! The moonlight was blazing and the palace rumbled. There was only a bamboo curtain between the two of them. Fortunately, Yi Xian restrained his aura and used the primordial spirit void mystic technique to the extreme. Once again he hid in the void. How dare you? Who dares to trespass into the Moon Palace? The Moon Palace fairy gritted her teeth, and a trace of anger flashed across her face. She used an immortal technique to find Yi Xian. At this moment, Yi Xian hurriedly left the rear hall. As his eyes moved, he quickly opened the Sumeru space and released the moon god. He even sent a sound transmission to her. I've already sent you to the Guanghan Palace. Quickly go and meet with your master. But you must remember, if you dare to reveal my identity, I will definitely destroy your soul and kill you. The moon goddess appeared in the moon palace. Looking at the familiar surroundings, she was so excited that she could not control herself. However, she did not know what had just happened. She followed the Moon Palace fairy's voice and hurried to the back of the palace. Master, Yunyang is back, the moon goddess said excitedly. She had already entered the back of the palace. This made Yi Xian let out a sigh of relief. Luckily, he reacted fast enough. Otherwise, if the Moon Palace fairy knew that he had seen her body, she would fight him to the death. The cold celestial light disappeared without a trace. The Moon Palace fairy's surprised voice came from the back of the palace. After a full 2 hours, a woman walked out from the back of the palace. In her arms, she was holding a snow-white jade rabbit. She was beautiful. She was so beautiful that she could make all living things go crazy. As she looked, it was as if the sky and earth would lose their color before her. It was just one look, but Yi Xian's eyes were a bit infatuated. His mind was in turmoil. It was as if he was going to fall into the Moon Palace fairy's face. Although Yi Xian had seen the moon god's manifestation of the moon goddess before, when he truly saw the number 1 fairy of the 3 realms, he knew why the Jade Emperor and the immortals in the sky were so infatuated with her that they couldn't extricate themselves. She was cold and pure. Her face was like ice. She gave people the feeling that they could only look at her from afar and could not profane her. She was like a lonely moon. Her entire body was blooming with an icy temperament. Along with her face that could turn the 3 realms upside down, it made people feel inferior. They felt that in the 3 realms, there was no man who was good enough for this woman. At this moment, the Moon Palace fairy was holding the jade rabbit. Her entire body was emitting a cold aura. Her face that could turn the 3 realms upside down was serious. She was sizing up Yi Xian. When she noticed Yi Xian's infatuated gaze, the Moon Palace fairy frowned. However, she did not say anything. She had seen this kind of gaze too many times. It had changed her from the initial disgust to the current calmness. "You are very beautiful." Suddenly, the infatuation in Yi Xian's eyes was gone. His expression had returned to normal. He even praised her. Looking at Yi Xian's clear eyes, the Moon Palace fairy was surprised. She looked at Yi Xian with a bit of curiosity. One had to know that she had seen too many men. Whether it was the ruler of the 3 realms, or the celestial gods and Buddhas, very few people could regain their sanity when they looked at her. Chapter 248. However, the person in front of her had only fallen for her for a moment. His eyes quickly regained their purity, as if he had not been captivated by her beauty. How could she not be surprised? It's been so many years. Very few people have spoken to me like that. You're the third. The moon fairy seemed to have thought of something. Her starry eyes seemed to be drifting, as if she was recalling something from the past. Who are the 2 people in front of me? Yi Xian narrowed his eyes and asked calmly. One is an ancient god, and the other is the current ruler of the 3 realms. You're the third person who dares to praise my beauty in front of me. The moon fairy woke up from her thoughts. Her voice was still cold and lonely. Yunyang has already told me the whole story. You were the one who killed Yuan Mo and saved her remnant soul. I owe you a favor. If you need anything in the future, you can come to the Moon Palace with this jade token. A jade token floated out of the moon fairy's hand and landed directly in Yi Xian's hand. Obviously, she was ordering Yi Xian to leave. Although Yi Xian made her feel that he was different from ordinary men, in the moon fairy's heart, no man in the 3 realms was worthy of her attention. Even Yi Xian was no exception. If Yi Xian had not sent the jade rabbit back, she would not have even seen this person. Remember, this jade token can only let me help you once. I hope you consider it carefully. Also, don't tell anyone that you came to the Moon Palace today. Otherwise, you will be killed. The moon fairy was cold and lonely. She wore a white palace dress, and her hair was tied into a bun. Holding the jade rabbit in her arms, she did not look at Yi Xian. She turned and walked into the inner palace. A primordial unity golden immortal? Looking at the moon fairy's back, Yi Xian narrowed his eyes. He had already discovered that the moon fairy's cultivation was 1 level higher than his. However, Yi Xian did not feel inferior, because he believed that he would not stop at the primordial unity mystic immortal realm. As for the moon fairy's disregard for him, it did not affect him in the slightest. Women were nothing more than tools. Even Fairy Guanghan, the number 1 fairy of the 3 realms, was no exception. Yi Xian looked down on the Jade Emperor, Yang Jian, and the others even more. If he had supreme cultivation, and could crush the immortals and gods of the heavens, he would directly press this woman down and ruthlessly ravage her. He would tear apart her cold and pure outer clothes, and let her know that no matter how beautiful she was just a man's plaything. A love? The Jade Emperor and Yang Jian actually believe in love? This was what Yi Xian found most laughable. The fairy of Guanghan was the greatest killing weapon in his hands. He had already sent the jade rabbit back to her side, but he had already planted a blood contract with it. When the time was right, it would naturally be used by him. Yi Xian turned around and left. He did not linger, nor did he look at the back of the moon fairy. Although Yi Xian was obsessed with the moon fairy's appearance, he would never fall in love with this woman. This was the difference between him and the Jade Emperor and the others. In Yi Xian's belief, the number one fairy of the three realms, the ruler of the three realms, and even the three pure ones, as long as you had invincible power, you could do whatever you wanted in the three realms. Love. Impossible in this lifetime. Yi Xian did not believe in this. He only believed in his own power. If he ascended to the 9 heavens one day, the so-called number one fairy of the three realms would be ravaged by him. Who would dare to say no? O noble, holy, and inviolable? In Yi Xian's eyes, these were all fake. In the face of absolute power, Yi Xian tore apart these hypocritical clothes and completely exposed his cruel and violent nature. Yi Xian admitted that he liked the moon fairy, but what he liked was her body and beauty. This was a man's most basic desire. But if he were to kneel and lick like the Jade Emperor, Yang Jian, and the others, then he, Yi Xian, would never be able to do it in his entire life. Suddenly, before Yi Xian could walk out of the moon palace, the moon fairy's cold voice rang out. Did my body look good just now? Yes, it was indeed beautiful, Yi Xian answered casually. His eyes suddenly focused and his aura fluctuated. Then, he rode on a cloud and disappeared from the moon palace. Damn it, it's really him. Within the moon palace, the moon fairy clenched her teeth, as an expression of shame and indignation flashed across her face. It was obvious that she wasn't sure if it was Yi Xian, but after probing for a while, she was finally certain. However, even if she knew the truth that made her feel ashamed and indignant, she wouldn't be able to chase after Yi Xian, unless she wanted everyone in the three realms to know that she, the moon fairy, had actually been spied on by someone. At that time, what would she do? But this matter was deeply etched in the moon fairy's heart. She would never let Yi Xian go. At the same time, in the bullfighting palace, the Jade Emperor's face was pale. He stared at the Xiantian mirror and saw Yi Xian riding a cloud into the void. He had just walked out of the moon palace. Yi Xian, who are you? The Jade Emperor waved his mirror image away. His aura was extremely sinister. He activated the Xiantian mirror every day, just to see the moon fairy's face, and relieve the pain of missing her. But what did he see today? As soon as he activated the Xiantian mirror, he saw Yi Xian walk out of the moon palace. Although the Jade Emperor believed that the moon fairy would not have an affair with Yi Xian, he could not accept a stranger entering the moon palace. The Jade Emperor tried his best to calm himself down. His sinister expression returned to normal, but the killing intent in his eyes could not be stopped. The 100,000 Heavenly River Navy was one of the central forces of the Celestial Court. The highest commander was Marshal Tianpeng. Under Marshal Tianpeng were the 9 luminary Star Lords. Each of them was in charge of 10,000 Heavenly River Navy. Each Star Lord was assisted by 3 immortal officials. They were in charge of 3,000 Heavenly River Navy. Demon Slayer Saint Lord. This was Yi Xian's title. He was below the 9 luminary Star Lords. However, the 9 luminary Star Lords were only true immortals, while Yi Xian was a Grand Unity Mystic Immortal. Clearly, these small immortal officials were not worthy of Yi Xian's cultivation. However, Yi Xian did not mind. He knew that this was the Jade Emperor's check on him. As he had just entered the Earth Immortal Realm, the complicated Celestial Court was his true foundation. 100,000 heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals stood in the vast heavenly river. War drums rumbled as they were counting the troops above the heavenly river. The 9 Star Lords sat cross-legged in the void. From time to time, their immortal officials would present them with books for them to read. However, the Wood Star Lord's expression was not good. Yi Xian was one of his immortal officials. Ever since the Jade Emperor's decree conferred Yi Xian the title, Yi Xian had not taken up his post for several days. This made the Wood Star Lord furious, but he did not dare to vent his anger. After all, Yi Xian was a grand unity mystic immortal, and had killed Primogenita demon. It was also said that this person was the reincarnation of the ancient Daoyuo Jingxian. How could the Wood Star Lord, a mere true immortal, dare to point fingers at Yi Xian? Chapter 249. However, when he received the Jade Emperor's decree yesterday, his fear of Yi Xian completely disappeared. He wanted to establish his dignity as the glorious Wood Star Lord today. Only 2 of the 3 immortal officials are here. Why isn't Yi Xian here? The glorious Wood Star Lord's voice was as loud as a bell, immediately silencing the 100,000 Heavenly River Navy. Don't be angry, Star Lord. I've already sent someone to inform him. He must be on his way. An immortal official bowed with a flattering smile. Humph. The glorious Wood Star Lord snorted coldly and said, Yi Xian thinks that his cultivation is profound, and that he has contributed to killing Essence Demon. He's actually arrogant. He's really arrogant. As soon as the glorious Wood Star Lord finished speaking, the other 8 Star Lords were stunned. They did not know what was wrong with the glorious Wood Star Lord today to target Yi Xian like this. Did he not know that Yi Xian was a grand unity mystic immortal, and had been personally conferred the title of Demon Slayer by the Jade Emperor? He was even regarded as a fellow Taoist by the Southern Heavenly Lord Longevity. Where did the glorious Wood Star Lord get the guts to say such words? Just as everyone was puzzled, a beam of immortal light streaked across the sky. Yi Xian arrived on a cloud, causing the 100,000 Heavenly River Navy and the 9 brilliant Star Lord to fall silent. It's my first time in the Heaven Realm. I didn't know about the gathering of troops. Please don't blame me. Yi Xian bowed and revealed an apologetic smile. Logically speaking, although Yi Xian's immortal position was small, his cultivation was there, and he had a decree personally conferred by the Jade Emperor. Who would dare to find trouble with him over such a trivial matter? But today, when facing Yi Xian, who was 1 realm higher than him, he slapped the white jade table in front of him, pointed at Yi Xian and scolded, How dare you? You are one of the 3 immortal officials under my command. How dare you call us fellow Taoists? Today is an important day for the Milky Way to summon the army, but you have not shown up. You are simply looking down on me and the other celestial lords. The eyes of the other 8 Star Lords narrowed. They knew very well that the Wood Brilliant Star Lord would never be so bold. Clearly, someone was backing him up, which was why something like this had happened. The water in the Heaven Realm was too deep. The 8 Star Lords remained silent and watched quietly. Anyway, Yi Xian was not their subordinate. They also wanted to see what Wood Brilliant Star Lord was going to do. At this moment, with a smile on his face, Yi Xian did not feel angry at all. He cupped his fist and bowed to Star Lord of Wood Brilliance and said, I'm sorry. I wonder how Star Lord will punish me. Humph. Looking at Yi Xian admitting defeat, Star Lord of Wood Brilliance felt relieved. He was really afraid that Yi Xian would not be able to control him. If that happened, he would lose all his face. But now, it seemed that although this person's cultivation was high, he was actually just a coward. This also made Star Lord of Wood Brilliance smile contemptuously. He pretended to be pretentious and said, Yi Xian, you have offended your superior. You will be punished with 3 years of Spirit Stone supply. You will lead your 3,000 Navy and train in the Milky Way day and night, until the 3-year period is up. It was a show of strength, a blatant show of strength. When the 8 Star Lords and the 100,000 Milky Way Navy were guessing whether Yi Xian would fly into a rage, the next scene made them look at Yi Xian with contempt. I accept my punishment. Yi Xian cupped his fist, and did not show any anger. TSK. I thought that this Demon Slayer perfected Lord was an incredible person, since he could kill Essence Demon. Now it seems that he's just SOSO. What do you know? No matter how strong perfected Lord Ye's cultivation is, he still has to abide by the rules of heaven. Star Lord of Wood Brilliance is his direct superior. How would he dare to be too presumptuous? In my opinion, he's just a coward. Not only was he punished, but he also implicated his 3,000 Navy. Just wait and see. A great deal of discussion rang out from the Navy. Although their voices were very soft, none of the 9 Star Lords present were deaf. They obviously heard it all. At this moment, the 8 Star Lords shook their heads helplessly. They could already tell that someone important was using Star Lord of Wood Brilliance to target Yi Xian. They did not dare to get involved in such a matter. Then they dismissed their heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals. They did not even dare to say goodbye to Yi Xian, and left the Milky Way on an auspicious cloud. Yi Xian, 3 years are up. I'll come and test the cultivation of your soldiers. If they don't improve at all, don't blame me for not taking into account our relationship as comrades. Star Lord of Wood Brilliance pretended to be strict with Yi Xian in a reprimanding tone. Then, he floated away on an auspicious cloud with a smug look on his face. At this moment, the 100,000 Heavenly River Navy had all dispersed. Within the surging waves of the Heavenly River, there were 3,000 Navy soldiers standing there. However, their gazes towards Yi Xian were filled with too many complicated emotions: disdain, anger, contempt, and doubt. Originally, the 3,000 Milky Way Navy soldiers respected Yi Xian very much because Yi Xian was a grand unity mystic immortal and had personally killed the essence demon that had wreaked havoc in the 3 realms. To be able to become Yi Xian's subordinates, the heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals, this made them feel extremely honored. However, the scene they saw today completely disappointed them. Yi Xian saw the expressions of the 3,000 Navy soldiers and naturally knew what they were thinking. However, Yi Xian did not care. This was because Yi Xian knew that the 3,000 Navy soldiers in front of him were his subordinates in the Celestial Court. He wanted to use the 3,000 Navy soldiers as a foundation to let everyone in the 3 realms know the name Yi Xian in the future. I don't care what you think of me, but from today onwards, you are my soldiers. I only need you to act according to my will. If anyone dares to feign compliance, don't blame me for being ruthless, Yi Xian said calmly. TCH, perfected Lord Yi. You can only show your authority to us heavenly soldiers. That's right. How would us puny immortals dare to resist? If you have the ability, go and show it to Star Lord Wood Brilliance. We find it laughable that he is oppressing us here. The 3,000 Celestial River Navy soldiers mocked and ridiculed. Although their voices were very soft, they were clearly noisy when gathered together. Yi Xian smiled and did not blame them. After all, these people were his subordinates. Time would slowly prove everything. Moreover, Yi Xian knew that he had to be serious when recruiting people. Even if he killed a few noisy people, it would only have the opposite effect. If he wanted to win the loyalty of the 3,000 Navy soldiers, he had to establish a true authority. Seeing that Yi Xian was not angry, the 3,000 Navy soldiers mocked and ridiculed him even more unscrupulously. Yi Xian sat cross-legged in the void without saying a word. After a few days, the 3,000 Navy soldiers felt bored and could only train in the Celestial River. However, no one noticed that although Yi Xian was sitting cross-legged in the void, a speck of immortal light surged out from between his eyebrows and quietly disappeared into the void. Star Lord Wood Brilliance's residence. Although Star Lord Wood Brilliance was one of the 9 great Star Lords and was in charge of 10,000 Celestial River Navy soldiers, he was only in the middle of the Celestial Realm. He did not even have his own palace. Chapter 250. However, today, Wood Brilliance Star Lord's face was glowing. The fairy children and fairies in his residence, as well as some rare beasts, were all rewarded by him. Star Lord, what made you so happy today? Can you tell me about it? A fairy dressed in a red palace gauze leaned softly in Wood Brilliance Star Lord's arms. She was drawing circles on his chest with her jade-like hands, as if she was waiting for him to do whatever he wanted. Haha, Wood Brilliance Star Lord drank all the wine in his cup. His broad palm rubbed the soft part of the girl, causing her to moan in a fanciful manner. Do you know that Taoist Yi Xian? Of course. This primordial unity Xian Immortal was conferred the title of Demon Slayer Sage Lord by His Majesty. He seems to be an extraordinary person. Haha. What extraordinary person? Doesn't he still have to obey my orders? Wood Brilliance Star Lord smiled complacently and told her what had happened today. Hearing Wood Brilliance Star Lord's narration, Fairy Hong's expression changed slightly. She said, Star Lord, This Taoist is a primordial unity Xian immortal. You have offended him today. Doesn't that mean? Would Brilliance Star-Lord smiled and said, My little sweetheart, don't worry. If I don't have some confidence, how can I offend this person? After saying that, Would Brilliance Star-Lord looked around. He lowered his voice and said complacently, Let me tell you a secret. Yesterday, His Majesty sent Venus Tai Bai to tell me to teach this Yi Xian a lesson. Obviously, this person has offended Jade Emperor. His immortal path will not last long. Moreover, Jade Emperor will certainly remember this in his heart. I am not far from a meteoric rise. Would Brilliance Star-Lord became more and more complacent. The fairy in his arms giggled. However, they did not notice that a figure was strolling toward them outside the door. I don't know if you will have a meteoric rise, but I know that today you will die without an intact corpse. Suddenly, Yi Xian's cold voice was heard. Would Brilliance Star-Lord was stunned. Then his expression changed greatly. He said, Who is talking? Wang. The void rippled as immortal light bloomed. When Yi Xian appeared in front of the Would Brilliance Star Monarch, he was instantly dumbfounded. It took him several dozen breaths to recover. How dare you? Without my summons, how dare you? Boom. Before Would Brilliance Star-Lord could rebuke him, Yi Xian unleashed his primordial immortal ray, which transformed into an immortal binding rope and imprisoned Would Brilliance Star-Lord. True monarchy, let's talk things over. Fellow Taoist, please don't be impulsive. The Would Brilliance Star-Lord's face was ghastly pale. This was because Yi Xian was radiating with demonic light in his eyes. When his eyes opened and closed, they were filled with viciousness and malice. Yi Xian was clearly trying to silence him. The Would Brilliance Star-Lord no longer had the time to ponder why Yi Xian would emit a demonic light. His heart was trembling, and all he wanted to do was escape this calamity. A mere true immortal dares to be impudent in front of me? Do you not know how to write the word death? Yi Xian's face was sinister as he strolled toward him. With each step he took, Would Brilliance Star-Lord's teeth were chattering. He put on a fierce front and said, Yi Daoyu, this is the Celestial Court. If you kill me, you will not be able to escape punishment. The Jade Emperor will not let you go. Die. Yi Xian did not waste any more words. The primordial immortal ray annihilated everything. It carried an extremely terrifying murderous intent, and directly blew Would Brilliance Star-Lord into a cloud of blood mist. Even his spirit dissipated under the primordial immortal ray. Don't kill me. The red muslin fairy's face was pale as she knelt on the ground. She was only a concubine of Would Brilliance Star-Lord, and her cultivation was only at the early stage of the fairy immortal realm. How could she be a match for Yi Xian? She pleaded with Yi Xian in a trembling voice. Unfortunately, Yi Xian's face was sinister. When he opened and closed his eyes, there was only ruthlessness. When he struck out with his palm, the fairy's soul was scattered and she died. Revenge should not be delayed. When killing someone, one must strike at their heart and kill them all, leaving no one alive. This had always been Yi Xian's principle of doing things. There was no exception even in the earthly immortal realm. A large formation isolated Would Brilliance Star-Lord's residence. A silent killing was going on. A large number of fairy children and fairies were killed. The rare and exotic beasts that roamed in the residence all died tragically at the hands of Yi Xian. Buzz! Yi Xian waved his hand and dispersed the formation. When he stepped out, there was no living creature left in Would Brilliance Star-Lord's residence. The strong smell of blood wafted out. He had slaughtered the entire family, leaving no one alive. Yi Xian did not kill Would Brilliance Star-Lord on the spot, because the 100,000 Celestial River Navy was nearby. He had just entered the Celestial Court, and had not yet gained a firm foothold. It was not good for him to cause trouble. Although Yi Xian did not lose his temper on the spot, it did not mean that he was a good person. On the contrary, he was an extremely vicious person who would seek revenge for the smallest grievance. Although he could not do anything to Would Brilliance Star-Lord on the surface, it was a piece of cake for Yi Xian to kill such a nonentity behind his back. Of course, Yi Xian's actions would certainly cause an uproar in the Celestial Court. They would also investigate the real culprit behind the scenes. Yi Xian would also become the biggest suspect. But so what? Yi Xian's primordial spirit had left his body, and he had used the primordial spirit void secret technique. He had even slaughtered Wood Brilliant Star-Lord's residence, leaving no living creature behind, not even their souls. Even if the immortals of the Heaven Realm and the Jade Emperor knew that he had done it, what could they do without evidence? Moreover, Yi Xian was establishing his authority. He was telling the Jade Emperor and the immortals that he was not easy to bully. If they wanted to test him, they had to be prepared to pay a price. Yi Xian could endure silently, but he was not weak. When it was time to attack, he would not be soft-hearted. This was also the reason why he could reach where he was today. In the vast celestial river, the 3,000 Navy soldiers were still training, but everyone was indifferent. Yi Xian sat cross-legged in the void, motionless. He only slowly opened his eyes when a bit of his primordial spirit returned. His entire body exuded the unique transcendent temperament of an immortal. There was no longer the ferocious expression on his face when he destroyed Wood Brilliant Star-Lord's residence. At the same time, the heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals patrolled Wood Brilliant Star-Lord's residence and naturally discovered this tragic scene. They reported it to the immortals of the Celestial Court in horror until they reached the Jade Emperor. The Celestial Court was shaken, and the immortals were in an uproar. How long had it been? Tens of thousands of years? Other than the monkey, who had caused havoc in the Celestial Court and committed such a bloody crime, no one had heard of any immortal dying tragically in their own residence for tens of thousands of years. Although Wood Brilliant Star-Lord's immortal position was not high, he was still one of the immortals. If they did not find out who did it, it would be a slap to the Celestial Court's face. In the Lingxiao Hall, the Jade Emperor's face was gloomy as he sat on the Emperor's throne. Below him stood the civil and military immortals, making the atmosphere in the entire Lingxiao Hall extremely oppressive. Your Majesty, Wood Brilliant Star-Lord has always been kind to others. Moreover, he is a true immortal. The person who killed him must be a primordial unity mystic immortal or above. Zhang Tianshi stepped forward and said in a loud voice, "This evil demon is vicious. Not only did he destroy Wood Brilliant Star-Lord's soul, but he also did not spare the living beings in his residence. If the Celestial Court does not investigate this matter strictly and catch the culprit, the dignity of the Celestial Court will be gone," an immortal official said bitterly. The Fire Lord stepped forward and knelt before the Jade Emperor. He said, "Your Majesty, the Demon Slayer Lord Xianxing is the biggest suspect in this matter. Today, the Wood Lord has just punished him. If he holds a grudge, he may be able to do such a cruel thing. How dare you?" Southern Heavenly Lord Longevity Life stepped forward with the dignity of a primordial unity golden immortal. He pointed at Fire Brilliant Star Lord and said angrily, "Yi Daoyu is a Taoist. How can he do such a thing?" Heavenly Lord Longevity Life, I'm not saying that true immortal Yi is the culprit. It's just that he is the most suspicious, Fire Brilliant Star Lord said righteously. In fact, the immortals and the Jade Emperor all knew that this must be Yi Xian's doing. The Wood Brilliant Star Lord had just punished him and died miserably in his residence in less than half a day. Since Yi Xian was able to kill the Origin Devil, killing a mere Wood Brilliant Star Lord couldn't be any easier. However, the immortals present were a little surprised. Yi Xian was too cruel. This was the Celestial Court, not the chaotic Earth Immortal Realm. Wasn't he looking for trouble by doing this? Summon Demon Slayer to the Lingxiao Palace. The Jade Emperor's dignified voice made the immortals look at him. They could see that the Jade Emperor's eyes were filled with unquenchable anger. It was obvious that there would be a good show to watch. Chapter 251. The Heavenly River. Yi Xian sat cross-legged in the air, with an expressionless face. He quietly watched the training of the 3,000 Navy soldiers below him. Every single one of the 3,000 Navy soldiers was dejected, unable to display any of their bravery. From the beginning to the end, Yi Xian did not reprimand or blame them. He allowed the 3,000 Navy soldiers to train lazily in the Heavenly River. This made the 3,000 Navy soldiers look down on Yi Xian more and more. Perfected cultivator Yi, look at what you have done. Suddenly, an auspicious cloud streaked across the distant sky. Before Venus Taibai arrived, His harsh voice had already been heard. Such a scene naturally stunned the 3,000 Navy soldiers. They all gathered their gazes on Venus Taibai. They did not know why the most tactful immortal in the celestial court was so flustered and exasperated. Yi Xian had already expected Venus Taibai's arrival. His expression did not change. He looked at Venus Taibai and asked in confusion, "What do you mean, fellow Taoist? What have I done?" Looking at Yi Xian's confused face, Venus Taibai was slightly stunned. Then his face turned cold and he said, "Perfected cultivator Yi, I don't want to criticize you. You have just entered the celestial court. Although your position is too low, you should not have killed Star Lord of Wood Brilliance. Now, the Jade Emperor is furious and wants to summon you to the Lingxiao Palace. You'd better come with me quickly." What a joke! Yi Xian's smile disappeared. His entire person turned cold. He said in a cold voice, "Venus Taibai, you can eat pills indiscriminately, but you can't speak carelessly. You said that I killed Star Lord of Wood Brilliance. Do you have any evidence?" "You." Looking at Yi Xian's gloomy face, Venus Taibai's heart trembled. Only then did he realize that there was something wrong with his words. Yi Xian's rhetorical question made him speechless. Evidence? Venus Taibai did not have any evidence. Even the Jade Emperor and the Immortals did not have any evidence. However, the truth was right in front of them. As a primordial unity Xian immortal, Yi Xian could cast his primordial spirit out of his body. It would be a piece of cake for him to kill a Star Lord of Brilliance would. However, Venus Taibai was a slick person. When he saw Yi Xian's gloomy face, he smiled flatteringly and said, "I was speaking nonsense." However, the Jade Emperor was enraged by the massacre of the Wood Brilliance Star Lord's residence. "He ordered me to summon you. Please come with me now." "All right, since the Jade Emperor wants to see me, I'd like to see who dares to slander me. If you don't give me a satisfactory answer, I won't let this matter rest." Wang. Billions of soul-suppressing banners surged through the void. Billions of miserable cries could be heard. Terrifying yin winds howled in all directions. Yi Xian's expression was cold. He rode on an auspicious cloud and shot towards the bullfighting palace's numinous sky hall. Hiss! Looking at Yi Xian's attitude, Venus Taibai's expression changed drastically. He could not help but gasp. Only then did he remember that Yi Xian was suspected to be the reincarnation of the ancient Daluo Jingxian. He even had the cultivation to kill essence demons. How could he be easily bullied? Perfected cultivator Yi, don't be angry. Listen to me. Venus Taibai did not dare to delay. He rode on an auspicious cloud and hurriedly chased after Yi Xian. After the two left, the 3,000 Heavenly River Navy soldiers were dumbfounded. They did not come to their senses for a long time. Is the Wood Brilliance Star Lord dead? Should be. Otherwise, why would His Majesty be so furious and order Venus Taibai to summon Perfected Cultivator Yi? I found it strange. Perfected Cultivator Yi didn't move or say anything just now. It seems that he used the primordial spirit projection technique to kill the Wood Brilliance Star Lord. Don't talk nonsense. If Perfected Cultivator Yi hears this, he won't have a good time. Tisk, if you ask me, Perfected Cultivator Yi doesn't show his true colors. There were 100,000 Navy soldiers beside him just now. Of course, he couldn't attack the Wood Brilliance Star Lord. Now it seems that our Perfected Cultivator Yi is not a simple person. Perfected Cultivator Yi is going to suffer now that His Majesty is angry. Whether he admits it or not, I'm afraid he will be severely punished. All kinds of discussions came from the 3,000 Heavenly River Navy soldiers. Apparently, their impression of Yi Xian had changed greatly because of what Yi Xian had done. However, they were not optimistic about the outcome of Yi Xian going to the Lingxiao Hall. In the Lingxiao Hall of the Bullfighting Palace, the Jade Emperor sat on the throne, and the Immortals stood side by side. Thousands of rays of auspicious light and immortal qi rose from the clouds, illuminating the entire Lingxiao Hall solemnly. Summon Perfected Cultivator Demon Slayer to the hall, an immortal official announced. Outside the Divine Wind Hall, Yi Xian, accompanied by Venus Taibai, strode into the Lingxiao Hall with the soul-subduing banner in his hand. Hiss! When the immortals saw Yi Xian holding the soul-subduing banner and emitting a strong evil aura, They all narrowed their eyes and lowered their heads slightly. A trace of surprise flashed across their eyes. Obviously, the immortals had expected the Jade Emperor to be angry. After entering the Lingxiao Hall, perfected cultivator demon slayer should immediately kneel and kowtow to ask for forgiveness. However, they did not expect that the situation was completely different from what they had imagined. How dare you, Yi Xian? You killed the Wood Brilliance Star Lord and actually slaughtered his entire residence. This kind of demonic behavior is simply outrageous. The Fire Lord took a step forward and pointed at Yi Xian as he angrily rebuked. Your Majesty, Yi Xian has no respect for the heavenly rules. He has done such a cruel thing. He should be stripped of his immortal record and sent to the animal path to experience 1,000 samsara. Military Star Lord stepped forward and reported to the Jade Emperor. The Jade Emperor, the supreme ruler of the three realms, covered his face with a veil and said in a dignified and harsh voice, Yi Xian, do you admit your crime? Admit my crime? Yi Xian smiled contemptuously. He strode forward with the soul-subduing banner in his hand and stood in the center of the Lingxiao Hall. He looked around at the immortals and finally looked at the Jade Emperor. Jade Emperor, you said that I am guilty. What crime have I committed? How dare you call His Majesty by his full name? This is the Lingxiao Hall. How dare a little immortal like you act so presumptuously? Fire Brilliance Star Lord and Wu De Star Lord rebuked loudly, but the immortals' expressions changed. They quietly sized up Yi Xian, and their eyes were filled with shock. Could it be that Yi Xian wanted to rebel against the Celestial Court? You killed the Wood Brilliance Star Lord and slaughtered his entire mansion. Isn't that what you did? The Jade Emperor said majestically, and his vast immortal pressure rolled in the Lingxiao Hall. At this moment, Yi Xian's face was fearless as he abruptly stabbed the soul-suppressing banner into the white jade ground, causing a loud bang to ring out. His expression was gloomy as he said, Since the Jade Emperor said that I killed the Wood Brilliance Star Lord, then show me the evidence to prove that I did it. As Yi Xian finished speaking, the entire Lingxiao Hall was dead silent. Even the Jade Emperor's expression was extremely gloomy. It was because he could not show any evidence. And Yi Xian had done it flawlessly. Looking at the Jade Emperor's silence, Yi Xian's lips curled into a cold smile. He believed in his methods. With the secret technique of the primordial spirit void, even if the Celestial Court had a secret treasure like the Divine Mirror, they would definitely not be able to find out that he was the one who did it. How dare you? The truth is right in front of you. How can you argue? Fire Brilliance Star Lord said angrily. Unfortunately, Yi Xian was not moved by Fire Brilliance Star Lord's angry rebuke. Instead, he looked at the Jade Emperor with narrowed eyes and said in a low voice, Jade Emperor, please uphold justice. Chapter 252. Yi Xian, I am the Lord of the Three Realms. I can see through everything. I will definitely not let you be wronged. I can only put you in jail first. After the matter is investigated, I will give you justice. Where are the four heavenly kings? I am here. The four heavenly kings stepped forward and bowed to the Jade Emperor. For the time being, keep Yi Xian in custody. When the truth is found out in the future, justice will be served to the Yi family. The Jade Emperor said sternly with a righteous attitude. The four heavenly kings were stunned. They could only walk toward Yi Xian awkwardly. It was obvious that they had to follow the Jade Emperor's orders. Humph. Suddenly, Yi Xian snorted and waved the soul-suppressing banner in his hand. The entire Lingxiao Hall shook violently, and the screams of ghosts could be heard. I am the reincarnation of the ancient Daoyuo Jingxian. I am beyond the three realms, and not in the five elements. Even the Celestial Court has no right to detain me. If the Jade Emperor does this, then don't blame me for being unreasonable. Rumble. The tiny immortal light shot in all directions. The soul-suppressing banner swayed. Yi Xian formed a seal with both hands, and an extremely terrifying aura spread out. The four heavenly kings' expressions changed drastically. They did not know what to do. How dare you, Yi Xian? Are you rebelling? Jade Emperor, this Taoist is arrogant and domineering. We should send him to the immortal slaying platform. The Fire Lord and Wu De Lord shouted angrily. The numinous treasures in their hands shone with bright immortal light. They had already joined forces with the 4 heavenly kings to surround Yi Xian. They looked like they were going to attack Yi Xian together. The celestial court has gone too far today. Don't blame me for being presumptuous. Yi Xian's expression was cold. He waved the soul-suppressing banner violently. He did not care about the immortals present at all. He formed a seal with both hands, and a large amount of Tai immortal light suppressed the 4 heavenly kings and the 2 celestial lords. Bang bang bang. Immortal light exploded, and the soaring clouds shook. When Yi Xian attacked, if not for the protection of the soaring clouds palace's heaven-guarding formation, Yi Xian's attack would have shattered the soaring clouds palace. Puff, puff. The 4 heavenly kings and the 2 star lords were only true immortals. How could they be a match for Yi Xian? With just one strike, the 6 of them were heavily injured. Blood continuously flowed from the corners of their mouths. The immortals watched coldly. From time to time, they would size up Yi Xian and secretly observe the changes in the Jade Emperor's expression. At this moment, the Jade Emperor's expression was gloomy. Zhouxi's immortal light was slightly chaotic. His jade-like palms were clenched and released at times. A hint of killing intent appeared in his eyes when he looked at Yi Xian. However, he quickly suppressed that emotion. In fact, what happened today was just a test by the Jade Emperor to Yi Xian. If Yi Xian surrendered, it would prove that he had no backing. The Jade Emperor could naturally do whatever he wanted to Yi Xian. However, the Jade Emperor did not expect Yi Xian's attitude to be so intense. He had the intention to destroy everything. This also made him afraid. He kept guessing who Yi Xian had as his backer. Actually, Yi Xian seemed to be arrogant and despotic right now, and he didn't seem to be afraid at all. In fact, he was panicking in his heart. This was his bet, and he was also taking risks. From the moment the Wood Brilliant Star Lord targeted him, Yi Xian knew that the Jade Emperor was behind it. If he showed his weakness today, the outcome that awaited him would definitely be extremely miserable. Not to mention that there were several primordial unity golden immortals present. Yi Xian could not see through the Jade Emperor's cultivation. If the Jade Emperor personally attacked him, even if he had a secret technique like the primordial spirit void, he might not be able to escape from the heaven realm. Back then, when the monkey wreaked havoc in the heavenly palace, it was because his backer was strong enough. The Jade Emperor could not afford to offend him at all. He could only let the monkey do whatever he wanted, and did not dare to do anything. However, Yi Xian knew his own family's matters. He didn't have any roots and was just alone. How could he compare to that monkey? Yi Xian could only display a fearless expression, as if he had a backer behind him. Only by doing this would the Jade Emperor become even more fearful of him. The Jade Emperor was testing Yi Xian. Wasn't Yi Xian testing the Jade Emperor too? This was a silent contest between the 2 of them. It was a contest to see who showed fear first and who would lose first. Moreover, Yi Xian knew that if he could survive this calamity, he would be able to establish his prestige very well. He could also lay a foundation in the celestial court, and let the immortals in the heaven realm know that he, Yi Xian, was not a simple person. Not everyone could provoke him. The Jade Emperor's expression was uncertain. He silently watched Yi Xian's expression, trying to see the panic on his face. However, Yi Xian was unbridled. When he waved the soul-subduing banner, a large number of heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals were sent flying. There was no sign of him being timid at all. All of you back off. Minister Yi, don't be angry. The Jade Emperor finally could not help, but pretended to be dignified and said, Buzz. Yi Xian kept the soul-subduing banner. His expression was resolute and unyielding. The immortals looked at him with a strange look in their eyes. They were all guessing what kind of background Yi Xian had to dare to resist the Jade Emperor in the Lingxiao Hall. Jade Emperor, since the Celestial Court thinks that I, Yi Xian, am easy to bully, then I don't care about the position of immortal. From now on, I will go to the lower realm and be a carefree scattered immortal. As Yi Xian spoke, he kept the soul-subduing banner and was about to walk out of the Lingxiao Hall. However, how could the Jade Emperor let him go? Minister Yi, don't be angry. I just want to test your cultivation. I will entrust you with a heavy responsibility. How can I really put you in the heavenly prison? The Jade Emperor smiled and stood up. He was no longer angry, and kept comforting Yi Xian. Yi Xian stopped. He knew that he had to stop when he was ahead. If he really did not know when to stop, the Jade Emperor would fall out with him. This was not the result he wanted to see. Your Majesty, the matter of the Wood Brilliance Star Lord has nothing to do with me. There must be a villain who deceived Your Majesty. Your Majesty, please help me. Yi Xian pretended to be distressed and said, Buzz. Suddenly, when the immortals were watching coldly from the side, thousands of rays of light bloomed in the sky. A golden talisman fell from the 33 heavens. When the golden talisman spread out, billions of rays of golden light covered the Lingxiao Hall. Whether it was the Jade Emperor or the immortals present, they all widened their eyes and were completely stunned on the spot. Yu Qing's decree? The Jade Emperor exclaimed in shock. His face turned extremely pale. The immortals even kowtowed. Every immortal's eyes were filled with panic. At the beginning of the world, Tao was born. Yi Xian fell from the primeval age and returned to the Tao sect. He is now conferred the title of Yu Qing's heavenly guardian. Rows of golden words filled the sky. When the golden words dissipated, a golden talisman descended, causing Yi Xian to receive it in a daze. His pupils slightly constricted. Yi Daoyu, aren't you going to thank Yuanshi Tianzuan? Venus Taibai reminded with a trembling voice. I obey Yuanshi Tianzuan's decree. Yi Xian tried his best to calm himself down. He held the golden decree in his hand and said respectfully, outside the 33 heavens Jade Palace, a Taoist was surrounded by the aura of chaos. No one could see his face clearly. However, when he opened and closed his eyes, they seemed to be able to see through everything in the world. He was looking down at Yi Xian in the heavenly palace. Heaven and earth have been turned upside down. Saints don't appear. Murderous star has appeared, and the heavenly Tao has collapsed. Let me see how far this kid can go in this immeasurable calamity. Chapter 253. Outside the Trayastrimsa Heaven, Aquamarine Palace. For immortal swords flew across the sky and a Taoist laughed. Senior brother, you are still the same. You can't hold it in anymore. Can you still protect your clan of Chan in this calamity? Outside the Trayastrimsa Heaven, an old Taoist sat cross-legged inside. West Spirit Mountain, 10,000 Dharma Buddhist Kingdom. Two Taoists had black and white chess pieces in front of them. They were playing a game of chess, giving off an illusory feeling. Senior brother, the calamity has begun. Yuanshi can't sit still anymore. Junior brother, don't be impatient. When the time is right, we will let him join our Buddhist sect. Above the 9 heavens, void secret realm. A Taoist in a green robe looked at the heavenly palace. His aura was gloomy and cold. My good disciple, everyone below the sage is an ant. You will never understand that this world is not as simple as you think. Celestial Court Lingxiao Palace. The golden light in the sky dissipated. The jade clear talisman fell into his hand. Yi Xian's mind was in turmoil. No one knew that when the jade clear talisman appeared, the heaven-destroying halberd, and the bronze immortal sutra, in his sea of consciousness went berserk. If he did not suppress it, these two things would have burst out from his sea of consciousness. At this moment, the Jade Emperor's face was pale. He looked at Yi Xian with fear. Today, the jade clear talisman fell from the sky. This completely proved his previous guess. Yi Xian's background was too strong. He was obviously from the clan of Chan. What shocked the Jade Emperor the most was that after so many years, the sage had already escaped into the chaos, and was no longer in the eyes of the world. But today, because of Yi Xian, the jade clear talisman fell from the heavenly palace. This was simply unimaginable. Not only was the Jade Emperor in turmoil, the other immortals' expressions changed too. They were more curious about Yi Xian's identity. What was the relationship between this Taoist and Yuanshi Tianzuan? Could it be he was the second-generation disciple of the clan of Chan? When this thought appeared in the hearts of the immortals, a look of horror appeared on their faces. They looked at Yi Xian with a look of fear in their eyes. How dare you? How dare you slander the guardian god of Chan school? If you don't give us justice today, we won't let this matter rest. Celestial Lord Longevity of the South stepped forward, followed by a large number of immortals. They occupied more than half of the immortals in the Lingxiao Hall, which also proved how much weight the Chanism had in the celestial court. Previously, Chongqing Tianzun wasn't sure if Yi Xian was a member of the Chan sect. But now, even Yuanshi Tianzuan's Yuqing talisman decree had appeared. This completely proved that Yi Xian was a member of the Chan sect. Jade Emperor, the Fire Virtue Starlord, and the Martial Virtue Starlord framed the heavenly guardians of the Chan sect. Jade Emperor, please uphold justice for the heavenly guardians of the Chan sect. Celestial Venerable Chang Sheng made a Taoist bow, and his voice was extremely sharp. At this moment, the complicated forces of the celestial court also appeared. Obviously, Chongqing Tianzuan and many other immortals with high cultivation were from the clan of Chan, and some of them were from the clan of Jia. Some of them were gods conferred by the investiture of the gods. Since the investiture of the gods was in the Jade Emperor's hands, these immortals were naturally under the Jade Emperor's command. Guards, take the Fire Lord and Wu De Star to the immortal slaying platform, strip them of their immortal records, and send them to the path of animals for 10 reincarnations. As the master of the 3 realms, the Jade Emperor naturally knew how to make a choice. Although he was the mastermind behind this matter, now that the situation had changed, he had to find a scapegoat. He could only throw the 2 of them out to calm the anger of the Chan school. Your Majesty, please spare our lives. When the Fire Lord and Wu De Star were begging for mercy, the 4 heavenly kings quickly stepped forward. They took out the immortal binding rope and tied the 2 up. They were escorted out of the Lingxiao Hall and towards the immortal slaying platform. If this scene had happened before the appearance of the Jade Pure Decree, Yi Xian would have felt relieved. However, he did not feel anything now. His aura was extremely fluctuating. Yuanshi Tianzuan was one of the 3 pure saints outside the 33 levels of heaven. Yi Xian did not expect that he would be noticed by Yuanshi Tianzuan and even be given the Jade Pure Decree. After all, he was not from the Earth Immortal realm. The great tribulation of witches and demons, and the fall of the untainted land were all fabricated by him. However, the appearance of the Jade Pure Decree had completely turned this lie into reality. How could Yi Xian not be frightened? The mind of a saint was unpredictable. Yi Xian only wanted to hide in the dark and constantly improve his cultivation. This was the path he wanted to take. However, the appearance of the Jade Pure Decree had completely disrupted his plan. Moreover, Yi Xian had an intuition that Yuanshi Tianzuan was not so kind as to confer the title of Divine Protector to him. He must have his own purpose. One could see the whole leopard from a single spot. Since Yuanshi Tianzuan knew of his existence, how could the other saints not know? Yi Xian now felt as if he was walking on thin ice. He felt that he had fallen into a terrible predicament. If he made a mistake, he was afraid that he would not even know how he died. Yi Xian had a faint guess. Could it be that the true body of the origin spirit was also one of the saints? Or was he Yuanshi Tianzuan? Thinking of this possibility, Yi Xian felt his scalp tingle. He did not dare to continue thinking about it. Minister Yi, I've really wronged you. When Yi Xian was deep in thought, the Jade Emperor personally walked towards him. He had an ashamed look on his face as he constantly comforted Yi Xian. Unfortunately, Yi Xian did not reply. He uneasily rode a cloud and left the Lingxiao Hall. This also stunned the Jade Emperor. He looked deeply at Yi Xian's back and did not say anything. After all, the Jade Pure Decree had already been issued. Even if he was unwilling, he could not do anything to Yi Xian. After leaving the Lingxiao Hall, Yi Xian rode a cloud back to the Chaotic Cloud Palace. The doors of the Chaotic Cloud Palace were tightly shut. Yi Xian sat cross-legged on a futon. He stared at the Jade Pure Decree in his hand. When his eyes opened and closed, there was an extremely sinister look. This Jade Pure Decree seemed to be his protective talisman. However, in Yi Xian's eyes, it was a talisman that hastened his death. The will of a saint could not be defied. Everyone below the saint was an ant. He was just a small grand unity mystic immortal. How could he attract the attention of a saint? Yi Xian knew very well that the root of all this was related to Yuan Ling. The heaven-destroying halberd, and the bronze immortal sutra in his body, must have an unimaginable origin. That was why a saint had noticed him. What should I do? Yi Xian kept asking himself. He was deep in thought. Buzz. Half a day later, Yi Xian woke up from his thoughts. When he waved his hand, 3 items appeared in front of him. The first item was the Bronze Immortal Sutra that Yuan Ling had left behind. The second item was the #1 killing weapon of all time, the heaven-destroying halberd. The third item was the River Styx diagram that Blood River ancestor had given to him. The Bronze Immortal Sutra was made of unknown materials. It recorded all the skills of the Immortal Sutra. Yi Xian had even obtained the forbidden chapter from it. Ever since the heaven-destroying halberd entered the Earth Immortal world, its murderous aura had been extremely restrained. Yi Xian could feel that the heaven-destroying halberd contained an unimaginably terrifying power. However, this power could not be used by him. As for the River Styx diagram, Yi Xian did not look at it carefully. Instead, he focused all his attention on the Bronze Immortal Sutra and the heaven-destroying halberd. Buzz! Suddenly something strange happened. The pages of the Bronze Immortal Sutra flipped. Black immortal characters spread out and instantly submerged the Jade Pure Decree. The golden light on the decree was directly swallowed up. Bang! There was a muffled sound. The Jade Pure Decree was instantly turned into ashes. The black immortal characters suddenly rushed into Yi Xian's glabella. He was stunned. Calamity Transcender Technique. After a full 10 breaths of time, Yi Xian cried out in shock, and his face turned extremely red. It was all because the immortal text just now was actually a secret technique that he had never seen in the forbidden section. What was the Calamity Transcender Technique? The world was a slaughterhouse and all living beings were food. The Calamity Transcender Technique walked the path of stealing the heavens. Not only could it devour the immortal's Tao fruit, but it could also turn the immortal's divine powers into one's own. This was the terror of the Calamity Transcender Technique. Yi Xian was pleasantly surprised, but he was even more astonished. This was because there was no such technique in the forbidden chapter, and the Jade Clear Talisman Decree was tainted with the aura of a saint. Yet the Bronze Immortal Sutra was able to devour it and evolve it into this heaven-defying technique. Yi Xian could not understand. However, he did not think about it anymore. Since he had already caught the attention of a sage, it was useless for him to worry about it day and night. He could only take one step at a time. Moreover, Yi Xian also understood that if a sage wanted to harm him, with his current cultivation, he would not be able to resist. The only thing he had to do now was to constantly improve his cultivation. As long as he was strong, whether it was the Jade Emperor or the high and mighty sage, he would have the ability to protect himself. Moreover, Yi Xian had a faint guess that the Bronze Immortal Sutra and the heaven-punishing halberd must be related to the sage. There were great secrets hidden in them. If he could find out these secrets one day, he might have the means to fight against the sage. Now that he had the Calamity Transcender Technique, he could quickly improve his cultivation. Not to mention, there were countless kinds of heaven and earth spirit medicines in this heaven realm. His cultivation would be improved qualitatively. Chapter 254. In the bullfighting palace, the Jade Emperor was wearing a green Taoist robe, and Venus Tai Bai was reporting something to him. Your Majesty, Yi Xian has the Jade Pure Decree. Your Majesty, you have to bear with it for the time being. Bear with it? The Jade Emperor laughed self-deprecatingly, and his face gradually darkened. He looked at Venus Tai Bai and said, as the master of the 3 realms, I can bear with the 3 pure ones. But do I have to bear with a little Taoist? This kid is extremely daring. Not only did he kill the Wood Brilliance Star Lord, but he also dared to sneak into the Moon Palace. Does he really think that he can look down on me just because he has the Jade Pure Decree? Hearing the Jade Emperor's words, Venus Tai Bai was stunned. He did not expect Yi Xian to be so daring as to sneak into the Moon Palace. No wonder the Jade Emperor was so against him. One had to know that the Moon Fairy was the Jade Emperor's taboo. All the immortals in the heaven realm knew that the Jade Emperor was obsessed with the Moon Fairy. In the distant past, the Canopy Marshal had flirted with the Moon Fairy. In a fit of anger, the Jade Emperor had sent him into the path of the beast to reincarnate for 1,000 generations. From this, It could be seen how much the Jade Emperor valued the Moon Fairy. Venus Taibai finally understood why the Jade Emperor was so furious. It turned out that the root of everything was the Moon Fairy. The Jade Emperor paced back and forth in the bullfighting palace. The aura around him became gloomier. Even his handsome face was slightly distorted. It made Taibai Jinxing keep quiet out of fear. He did not dare to make a sound, because he knew that the Jade Emperor was on the verge of exploding with rage. Venus Taibai. Yes, Your Majesty. Spread this void image. I want to see how this Yi Xian will survive this calamity, even with the Jade Clear Talisman edict in his hands. The Jade Emperor tossed out a cyan jade slip. Under the fluctuation of immortal light, the scene of Yi Xian leaving the Guanghan Immortal Palace appeared. This caused Taibai Jinxing to be stunned, and his face turned pale. Your Majesty, you mustn't do this. If this scene were to spread, not to mention the other celestial beings, I'm afraid that your nephew Yang Jian would. Taibai Jinxing stuttered. That nephew of mine is arrogant and unruly, and he's even a disciple of the Jade Void sect. He doesn't even put me, his uncle, in his eyes. It's a good opportunity for Yang Jian to kill Yi Xian's spirit. Looking at the Jade Emperor's sinister expression, Taibai Jinxing's eyes narrowed. Since ancient times femme fatale. That saying was true. Taibai Jinxing deeply understood that if this void image were to be spread out, then true Lord Erlang would definitely be furious. Even if Yi Xian had the Jade Clear Talisman in his hands, he definitely wouldn't have a good time. Yang Jian, the third-generation disciple of the Chan sect, was a disciple of the immortal Yu Ding. His arts of 8-9 were extremely terrifying, and he had the divine power of the 36 heavenly dipper transformations. His third dharma I could see through the heaven, earth and man realms. He was known as the #1 war god of the 3 realms. When the monkey wreaked havoc in the heavenly palace, the Jade Emperor begged Yang Jian to subdue the monkey. Although there were some twists and turns, it proved that the #1 war god of the 3 realms deserved his reputation. Most importantly, it was said that Yang Jian had been in seclusion for 10,000 years and was about to enter the Daluo Jingxian realm. His cultivation was even more mysterious. How could Yi Xian, a mere Tai Xian immortal, be a match for Yang Jian? Tai Xian immortal, Tai Golden immortal, overarching heaven Xian immortal, overarching heaven Golden immortal, until he entered the Daluo Jingxian realm. Yi Xian and Yang Jian were 3 realms apart. The Jade Emperor's plan of killing with a borrowed knife was indeed extremely vicious. Venus Taibai didn't dare to say anything. He took the green jade slip and left. Looking at Venus Taibai's back, the Jade Emperor stood alone in the bullfighting palace and said in an extremely gloomy voice, Yi Xian, I didn't want to make things difficult for you, but who asked you to violate my taboo? At the same time, the chaotic cloud palace was very lively these days. Immortals from all over the world came to congratulate him. Yi Xian received them with a smile. Naturally, he drank and chatted happily with the immortals of the heaven realm. The 3,000 heavenly river navy guarded the chaotic cloud palace and completely established Yi Xian's foundation in the heaven realm. However, Yi Xian wasn't arrogant at all. Other than receiving the visiting immortals, he didn't go out at all. In the chaotic cloud palace, he crazily cultivated the calamity transcender technique and the immortal scripture, hoping to break through to the Tai Golden immortal realm as soon as possible. However, cultivation wasn't something that could be achieved overnight. Although Yi Xian was extremely talented, he had just become an immortal. Moreover, he directly crossed several realms and entered the Tai Xian immortal realm. This was already a miracle. It was obviously impossible for him to enter the Tai Golden immortal realm in a short time. Most of the immortals in the heaven realm were in the Xian immortal or Golden immortal realm. There were only a few of them in the Tai realm. As for the immortals with real divine abilities, how could they be bound by the small heaven realm? They had already wandered far away. For example, the great god of the 3 seas, Neza, was an overarching heaven Xian immortal. He was only 1 step away from entering the overarching heaven Golden immortal realm. He was only 2 steps away from Daluo Jingxian, who was beyond the 3 realms and not in the 5 elements. Although Yi Xian was labeled as a member of the Chan sect, the real great divines wouldn't lower themselves to visit him. This was also the pride of the great divines. Therefore, although Yi Xian seemed to be glorious now, in the eyes of the great divines, he was just a small immortal. Yi Xian was also aware of his own situation, but he wasn't discouraged. He could go from immortal to a Taishian immortal in less than 10 years. He was confident that he could break through to the Tai Golden Immortal realm within 10 years and ascend to the 9 heavens step by step. He even wanted to take a peek at the legendary Sage realm. In the chaotic cloud palace, a stream of immortal qi gushed out of Yi Xian's mouth. He slowly opened his eyes, and a wisp of blood-red immortal light quietly flashed across his eyes. I've mastered the Tribulation Transcender technique, but with the immortals of the heaven realm nearby, it's too eye-catching to kill an immortal and devour their cultivation. However, if I continue to cultivate step by step, it will take at least 5,000 years to reach the Tai Golden Immortal realm. Yi Xian frowned slightly. His voice was slightly unwilling, and he fell into deep thought. If it took 5,000 years to step into the next realm, Yi Xian absolutely couldn't accept it. Now that he had become the target of public criticism, such a long cycle would only lead to unexpected changes. In fact, Yi Xian didn't know that although 5,000 years seemed long, it was actually just a snap of the fingers in the eyes of the other immortals. If they could advance by a large realm, it would make them go wild with joy. From immortal to a celestial immortal, other immortals would need at least 10,000 years to cultivate bitterly. However, from a celestial immortal to a Taishian immortal, it would take hundreds of thousands of years. In the immortal realm, every advancement by a large realm would take an endless amount of time. Yi Xian could go from immortal to a Taishian immortal in 10 years. This was already a fantasy. Spiritual essence of heaven and earth, golden core immortal peach. Yi Xian narrowed his eyes, and his voice was extremely strange. Yi Xian stayed in the celestial court, enduring the Jade Emperor's spying. He was walking on thin ice. He was doing this for the spirit pills and treasures unique to the heaven realm. Only these things could allow his cultivation to increase at a terrifying rate in the shortest time possible. Chapter 255. The wealth of the celestial court was unimaginable. This was also the reason why Yi Xian had been so patient and had not left. He had been planning for his own cultivation. However, Yi Xian also knew that there were too many forbidden areas in the celestial court. The first was the Peach Garden, where immortal great peaches that were between 3,000 and 9,000 years old were planted. The second was the Tushita Palace of Taishang Laojun, where there were countless elixirs and miraculous medicines. There were even elixirs that could allow mortals to become immortals. There was also the legendary 9 Transformations Golden Elixir that could raise an immortal's realm. The third was the Celestial Court's treasure house, where there were countless immortal spells and weapons, as well as countless spiritual items of the universe. However, Yi Xian was very annoyed. The Peach Garden was protected by the Heaven Sealing Formation. Even if he had the primordial spirit void, he could not sneak into the Peach Garden. If he tried to break the formation by force, it would definitely lead to great changes. The Tushita Palace was the Taishang Laojun's place of enlightenment. The Taishang Laojun was the external incarnation of Lao Tzu, one of the 3 pure ones. He helped the Jade Emperor to control the 3 realms. Even if Yi Xian was brave, he would not dare to sneak into the Tushita Palace to steal the elixirs. The key to the Celestial Court's treasure house was controlled by the Jade Emperor. If Yi Xian wanted to get the key to the Celestial Court's treasure house from the Jade Emperor, he would be courting death. Yi Xian thought hard, but could only shake his head helplessly. These 3 forbidden areas were really tempting to him, but there was nothing he could do. Yi Xian could not help but sigh. It was a great fortune for the monkey to be able to eat the Peach Garden and Golden Elixir. However, Yi Xian also knew that the monkey wreaked havoc in the Celestial Court with the tacit consent of Buddhism and Taoism. How could he compare to the monkey? Yi Xian became more and more frustrated as he racked his brains. However, before he could think of a way to increase his cultivation, a series of hurried footsteps came from outside the chaotic cloud palace. Yi Daoyu, quickly descend to the lower realm and hide for 1,000 years. Heavenly Venerable Chang Sheng rushed into the chaotic cloud palace with an anxious look on his face. Before Yi Xian could ask what was going on, Heavenly Venerable Chang Sheng urged him to hurry. Fellow Taoist, what happened? Yi Xian was startled, and a bad premonition arose in his heart. Looking at Yi Xian's confused expression, the Longevity Celestial Lord reprimanded him. Let me ask you, did you sneak into the Moon Palace? Yi Xian's expression changed drastically as soon as Empyrean Longevity finished speaking. One had to know that him sneaking into the Guanghan Palace was a secret between him and the Guanghan Fairy. How could it have reached the ears of Empyrean Longevity? Looking at Yi Xian's stunned expression, Heavenly Lord Changxing sighed and said, Fellow Taoist, what should I say to you? That day, I repeatedly told you to take a detour when you passed by the Moon Palace. Why didn't you listen to my advice and do such a foolish thing? At this moment, Yi Xian tried his best to calm himself down. He kept recalling his experience in the Moon Palace. Suddenly, an idea flashed across his mind. He finally knew where the problem was. When he left the Moon Palace that day, because of the Fairy of the Moon Palace's words, his aura became chaotic, and a flaw appeared in his primordial spirit void. For a moment his figure was revealed. However, Yi Xian did not care about it. But now it seemed that the problem occurred at that time. It exposed the fact that he had entered the Moon Palace. Fellow Taoist, how did you know that I had entered the Moon Palace? Yi Xian narrowed his eyes and asked. Oh, I'm not the only one who knows about this. The entire Celestial Court knows that you have entered the Moon Palace without permission. You'd better go to the lower realm and hide for 1,000 years. Otherwise, a disaster will befall you. Heavenly Venerable Chang Sheng was exasperated. Fellow Taoist, you must be joking. I have known the Fairy of the Moon Palace since the Untainted Land. Now that I have reappeared, what's wrong with meeting her? Did I violate any heavenly rules? Yi Xian was now a dead pig that was not afraid of boiling water. Since the matter had been exposed, he would let nature take its course. He even said some high-sounding words. Fellow Taoist, it doesn't matter even if you have violated the heavenly rules. Because you are the Yuqing guardian deity conferred by Yuanshi Tianzuan, the Celestial Court can't do anything to you. But you should never have gone to the Moon Palace. Immortal Venerable Chang Sheng explained the seriousness of the matter to Yi Xian. This made Yi Xian's face turn gloomy. Only then did he know why Immortal Venerable Chang Sheng was so anxious. There were countless immortals, Buddhas, and great demons in the three realms who admired the Fairy of the Moon Palace. Yi Xian's actions had directly violated their taboo. Not to mention, if the true Lord Erlang were to find out about this, he would definitely ascend to the heavens and teach Yi Xian a lesson. Yi Xian had never forgotten that Primogenita Demon was a primordial unity golden immortal, but he was still chased by Yang Jian for hundreds of millions of miles. In the end, he was sealed in the retrograde passage by a group of immortals. He was now only a primordial unity Xian immortal. If Yang Jian really came to the heavens to find trouble with him, even though he was conferred as the Yuqing guardian deity and belonged to the same lineage as Yang Jian, his life would not be in danger, but he would definitely end up in a miserable state. Fellow Taoist, the pure young golden immortal Lu Dongxian is my best friend. He has a Taoist temple in the Earth Immortal Realm's Black Cave Mountain. Go down to the mortal realm secretly and take my spiritual talisman to his place to hide for a while. When the news dies down, return to the Celestial Court. Immortal Venerable Chang Sheng threw out a spiritual talisman and handed it directly to Yi Xian. He kept urging him to go down to the mortal realm as soon as possible. At this moment, Yi Xian's face was gloomy, but he did not move. He knew that Immortal Venerable Chang Sheng was doing this for his own good. He wanted him to escape this great calamity. But Yi Xian also knew that if he escaped to the mortal realm like this, his reputation would be completely ruined in the future. Sage Erlang Xiansheng? Yi Xian said in a gloomy voice. His eyes flickered with a bloody light as he directly rejected the spirit talisman that Heavenly Sovereign Chang Sheng handed over. He said, if he really wants to cause trouble for me without any reason, this humble Taoist will naturally not be afraid of him. Immortal Venerable Changsheng looked at Yi Xian's fearless face and said in exasperation, "Fellow Taoist, you are really stupid. My junior brother Yang Jian is an all-heaven golden immortal. He is only one step away from entering the realm of Dalio Jingxian. Even though he does not take the Jade Emperor seriously, he is extremely domineering in the Chan sect. Other than his master, Immortal Yu Ding, he does not listen to anyone. Brother, I appreciate your kindness. Even though Yang Jian is the war god of the three realms, if he thinks that I am easy to bully, he is very wrong." Yi Xian said coldly. When he opened and closed his eyes, there was a flash of blood-red light. "Come, send Immortal Venerable Changsheng off." Before Immortal Venerable Changsheng could continue to persuade him, Yi Xian turned and left. This made Immortal Venerable Changsheng sigh helplessly. He flung his sleeves and left the chaotic cloud palace on a cloud. In fact, Immortal Venerable Changsheng had been very kind to Yi Xian. If it were not for the Jade Pure Decree, he would not have gotten involved in this matter at all. Yang Jian was one of the most outstanding among the third-generation disciples of the Chan sect. He was not someone Immortal Venerable Changsheng could compare with. Earth Immortal Realm, Guanjiang Estuary Shimi Cave. A young immortal general in silver chainmail and cloud boots was sitting cross-legged in the void to cultivate. Chapter 256. His face was like jade, and there was a vertical eye between his eyebrows. Beside him was a three-pointed double-edged sword that floated up and down in the void. His body occasionally emitted a golden light that caused the Simmer Grotto heaven to distort slightly. This person was Yang Jian, the Divine Lord Erlang, the #1 god of war in the three realms. Second Master. The void was chaotic in ripples spread. The eldest of the 7 monsters of Plum Mountain, Yuan Hong, spoke loudly, causing Yang Jian to slowly open his eyes. "Why are you in such a hurry?" Yang Jian asked. Second Master, look. Yuan Hong didn't say anything else. He tossed out a cyan jade slip and directly displayed the image of Yi Xian leaving the Guanghan Palace. When this scene appeared in Yang Jian's eyes, it instantly caused him to suffocate and his expression to instantly darken. "What a thief! How dare you sneak into the Moon Palace?" Yang Jian's eyes were cold and murderous. The power of an all-heaven golden immortal caused the entire Simmer Grotto heaven to rumble, as if it would collapse at any time. Who is this Taoist? Doesn't he know that the Moon Palace is a forbidden area in the three realms? Yang Jian tried his best to control his aura, but his voice became colder and colder. Second Master, I've already investigated. This Taoist's name is Yi Xian. Because he killed Primogenitor Demon, the Jade Emperor conferred him the title of Divine Lord Demon Slayer. Yuan Hong reported truthfully. Divine Lord Demon Slayer? Yang Jian narrowed his eyes and said with a slight contempt, "My uncle is quite interesting. Other than Demon Slayer, he has the same title as me. Is Yi Xian also an all-heaven golden immortal?" Yang Jian said coldly. Looking at Yang Jian's cold face, Yuan Hong whispered, "Big brother, this Taoist is only a Tai mystic immortal. Perhaps he is someone in the celestial court, but in front of Second Master, he is nothing. It's just that what?" Yang Jian's eyes narrowed. Second Master, there is a Jade Clear decree outside the 33 heavens that conferred Yi Xian the title of Jade Clear Divine Protector. Hearing Yuan Hong's words, Yang Jian's eyes narrowed. He didn't care about the Jade Emperor's conferment, but the Jade Clear Talisman decree was Yuan Shi Tianzuan's will. He had to consider it carefully. After dozens of breaths, Yang Jian woke up from his deep thoughts, and a cold smile appeared on the corners of his mouth. So what if he's from Chan school? If we don't teach this Taoist a lesson, I'm afraid there will be lechers who will imitate him. Yang Jian snorted coldly. As the war god of the three realms, even though Yi Xian had the Jade Clear Talisman decree, it was not a big deal to Yang Jian. As long as he did not kill Yi Xian, even Yuan Shi Tianzuan could not blame him. After all, saints couldn't be born in the three realms. This had become an ironclad rule after the God Seal War. This world was ruled by Dalio Jingxian, and Yang Jian was about to step into that realm. He really didn't fear anyone in the three realms. Saber, come. Yang Jian said coldly. The all-heaven immortal light rippled in all directions, and the Sumeru space shattered. When he stepped out, he appeared in the sky above the Guan River. On this day, the winds and clouds changed, and the Guan River was overturned. The war god of the three realms, Yang Jian, stepped into the sky with his three-pointed double-edged saber and silver chainmail, straight into the 33rd heaven. The celestial court, the 33rd heaven. The immortals were shocked and silent, because they all knew that the war god of the three realms was coming to the heaven realm. The four heavenly kings of the southern heavenly gate, and Li Jing led 100,000 heavenly soldiers and generals to welcome Yang Jian. Yang Jian was the number one disciple of the third generation of Chan school, under the Jade Void sect. His title was Erlang Divine Lord. His 8-9 mysteries Tongtian could move the earth, and his heavenly spirit 36 transformations was unpredictable. His heavenly eye could illuminate the three realms of heaven, earth, and man. No one could compare to his power. Golden lotuses fell from the sky, and sweet springs gushed from the ground. The heavenly music of the 9 heavens was playing, and the immortals were bowing. From this, it could be seen how high Yang Jian's position in the celestial court was. Yang Jian entered the celestial court, and walked past the southern heavenly gate. He did not stay, nor was he in the mood to chat with the immortals. He went straight into the Lingxiao Palace, and asked the immortals to follow behind him. The Lingxiao Palace. There were thousands of auspicious qi, and tens of thousands of rays of light. The Jade Emperor was wearing an emperor's robe and sat high up, while the immortals stood below to accompany him. Without waiting for the immortal officials to summon Yang Jian into the palace, Yang Jian held his three-pointed, double-edged saber, and went straight into the Lingxiao Palace. The all-heaven immortal light around him made the immortals look at him in shock. Yang Jian, why didn't you cultivate at the Guan River? Why did you come to the heaven realm today? The Jade Emperor said sternly. Yang Jian's face was cold, and he did not respond to the Jade Emperor's pretense. Instead, he looked around at the immortals and said in a calm and cold voice, I heard that the celestial court's demon slayer Immortal Xiansheng has an unfathomable cultivation. I've heard of it for a long time. Today, I want to ask for advice from him to verify my cultivation. The immortals did not believe Yang Jian's words. They all knew that Yang Jian came because Yi Xian had sneaked into the Guanghan Celestial Palace. As for the so-called advice, they were afraid that his real purpose was to teach Yi Xian a lesson. Junior brother, you're an all-heaven golden immortal, and Yi Xian is only a Tai Xian immortal. How can he be your opponent? Why don't we just drop the matter? Heavenly Lord Changsheng asked tentatively. Senior brother Changsheng, although we don't have the same master, we're from the same sect. This demon slayer Immortal Xiansheng is the reincarnation of Daluo Jingxian. It's a good opportunity to verify your cultivation. I hope you won't dissuade me. Yang Jian's voice was cold, but he was telling Heavenly Lord Changsheng that if he continued to speak for Yi Xian, he could not blame Yang Jian for falling out with him. Summon Yi Xian to the Lingxiao Palace, the Jade Emperor said sternly. The Jade Emperor spoke in a dignified manner, but a cold glint flashed across his eyes. His plan to kill with a borrowed knife was about to bear fruit. Lunar Star Guanghan Palace. The Guanghan fairy held the jade rabbit in her arms and stood under the Tongtian osmanthus tree. Her eyes shone like stars as she looked at the Lingxiao Palace. When she saw Yang Jian standing in the middle of the palace, her cold voice slowly rang out. Yunyang, although Yi Xian saved your life, he also peeped at this fairy's jade body. It's only right that he has this calamity. Master, please save his life, the jade rabbit pleaded. It was not that she pitied Yi Xian, but because if Yi Xian died, she would not be able to live either. After all, Yi Xian's blood contract was still planted in her primordial spirit. The Guanghan fairy's eyes were cold. Then she slowly nodded and said, That's good too. Saving his life today can be considered as helping you repay his kindness. Thank you, Master, the Jade Rabbit said happily. On this day the lunar star shone. The Tongtian osmanthus tree swayed. A moonlight bridge hung down from the celestial court. The Guanghan fairy, who had not walked out of the moon palace for 10,000 years, covered her face with a veil. She was walking along the moonlight bridge towards the Lingxiao Palace. Chaotic Cloud Palace. The immortal official came with the Jade Emperor's instructions and summoned him to the Lingxiao Palace. Yi Xian sent the immortal official away and stood alone in the chaotic cloud palace. His expression was indifferent and silent. When his eyes opened and closed, there was a bloody light flashing violently. Buzz! The space between Yi Xian's eyebrows shone. The heaven-destroying halberd rippled out. It was releasing a fierce aura that had never been seen before. You and I are of the same mind. Today's battle is a battle of dignity for me, Yi Xian. Even if Yang Jian is an all-heaven golden immortal, I will let these immortals know that I, Yi Xian, am not a pushover. Yi Xian's voice was cold. He did not run away and could not run away. This was a battle of dignity. If he ran away, he would become the laughing stock of the three realms. He would also be ridiculed by the Guanghan fairy, who thought she was infallible. Now the only thing Yi Xian could count on was the heaven-destroying halberd. This was because according to the immortal scripture, the heaven-destroying halberd was the #1 killing weapon of all time. It contained incredible power. Most importantly, Yi Xian did not use the heaven-destroying halberd in his battle with Yuan Ling. He also wanted to see if he could cross 3 realms to fight the war god of the 3 realms, when he transformed into a grand unity Xian immortal and wielded the heaven-destroying halberd. This was not only a battle of dignity, it was also a way for Yi Xian to measure his battle strength. This was also related to his next plan. Rumble. Pushing open the door of the chaotic cloud palace, Yi Xian rode on a black cloud and rushed towards the Lingxiao Palace under the gaze of the 3,000 heavenly river navy. Chapter 257. Bullfighting Palace, Lingxiao Hall. Yang Jian looked down at the immortals and stood proudly in the middle. He had an aura that made the immortals of the heaven realm not dare to breathe. In terms of cultivation, Yang Jian was the top disciple of the 3rd generation of the Chan school. In terms of cultivation, Yang Jian was an all-heaven golden immortal and was about to enter the realm of Daluo Jingxian. He was also known as the top war god of the 3 realms. From the immortals of the celestial court to the Hades, Yang Jian was the brightest star no matter where he went. No one could cover his light. The immortals of the heaven realm sighed. It would be fine if Yi Xian escaped. But if he really came to the Lingxiao Hall, even if he wasn't killed by Yang Jian, his fate would be extremely miserable. Fairy Guanghan has arrived. Suddenly, the celestial official said with a trembling voice. A moonlight sky bridge spread out. The goddess of Guanghan covered her face with a veil and was walking on the moonlight sky bridge. When she arrived in the Lingxiao Hall, all the celestials present were stunned into silence. No one had expected that Fairy Guanghan, who hadn't left the Moon Palace for 10,000 years, would actually come to the celestial court today. This simply shocked the immortals. At this moment, the Jade Emperor's body stiffened. Yang Jian was no longer arrogant. They all looked at Fairy Guanghan. The infatuation in their eyes seemed to be about to turn into reality. Greetings, Jade Emperor. The Jade Emperor was the ruler of the 3 realms and the master of the celestial court. Fairy Guanghan naturally wouldn't be rude. She bowed slightly. Fairy, there's no need to be so polite. The Jade Emperor instantly woke up. His voice trembled slightly. He ignored his dignity and quickly walked down the Lingxiao Hall. It seemed that he wanted to help Fairy Guanghan up. Unfortunately, before the Jade Emperor could step forward, the Fairy of Guanghan took 3 steps back. Tai Bai Jingxing also coughed to remind the Jade Emperor. Immediately, the Jade Emperor woke up. His face was slightly red as he sat back on his throne. Chang'e, why are you here? Yang Jian was overjoyed. He strode toward the Fairy of Guanghan. However, the Fairy of Guanghan frowned and said, Please conduct yourself with dignity. Even though Fairy Guanghan's face was covered by a veil, she still gave people the feeling that she could only be seen from afar and could not be profaned. She also radiated a cold and pure aura. This made Yang Jian smile awkwardly. He knew that he had been too rash. Greetings, Fairy Guanghan. Yang Jian bowed and cupped his fists at Fairy Guanghan. This made the other immortals look at him with a hint of helplessness in their eyes. It was true that heroes could not resist the charms of beautiful women. When Yang Jian came to the celestial court, he did not even greet the Jade Emperor. However, when the Moon Fairy appeared, he bowed solemnly. From this, it could be seen how important the Moon Fairy was to Yang Jian. I heard that Perfected Lord is about to become a Zenith Heaven Golden Immortal. I have nothing to do in the Moon Palace, so I specially came to the heavenly courts to observe Perfected Lord's Tao, skills, and mystical abilities, Fairy Guanghan said softly. Fairy Guanghan did not say that she had anything to do with Yi Xian. Instead, she used the excuse of observing Yang Jian's Tao skills. This made Yang Jian happy. He cupped his fists and said, "If you are willing, I can teach you all my skills. Today, I just want to teach this Taoist Yi Xian a lesson, so that he does not know the etiquette of the celestial court." Yang Jian did not say that he came to the celestial court for Fairy Guanghan. However, his words made it clear that he wanted to please the Fairy of Guanghan. This made the other immortals shake their heads helplessly. They secretly sighed that Yi Xian was really unlucky. He could have provoked anyone, but he had to provoke the Fairy of Guanghan. At this moment, the Jade Emperor sat on the throne. His face was calm, showing the majesty of the Lord of the Three Realms. However, when he opened his eyes, he looked at Yang Jian with a sinister look. If the Jade Emperor saw Yi Xian as a stumbling block, then Yang Jian was a thorn in his heart. He wanted to get rid of him as soon as possible. However, he could only think about it because the Jade Emperor knew that it was impossible. Demon Slayer Lord Xianxing has arrived. Suddenly, the voice of an immortal official came from outside the hall. The other immortals' faces changed slightly. They all looked outside the hall. Yi Xian was dressed in black. His black hair fell behind his head. His face was calm, and there was no aura around him. He was walking slowly into the Lingxiao Hall. Yi Xian stood in the center of the hall. When he saw the Fairy of Guanghan, his eyes narrowed. He did not expect this woman to be here too. "Minister Yi, Erling Lord Xianxing has come to the celestial court. I heard that you have great Tao skills, so I came to ask you for advice. What do you want?" The Jade Emperor said sternly. The other immortals looked at each other with different expressions. Everyone sighed in their hearts when they saw Yi Xian appear here. They secretly blamed Yi Xian for not knowing his limits. Did he not know that Yang Jian was here for him? How dare he appear here? Unfortunately, Yi Xian did not respond to the Jade Emperor's question. Instead, he looked at Yang Jian, who was beside the Fairy of Guanghan, and smiled. "I'm just a grand unity mystic immortal. How can I be a match for Erling Lord Xianxing? There's no need for this advice, right?" As Yi Xian spoke, the immortals all nodded without the slightest bit of surprise. It was obvious that Yi Xian knew his own limits, and knew that he wasn't Yang Jian's match. It was reasonable for him to say such words. At this moment, Yang Jian's smile disappeared as he stared at Yi Xian. A trace of contempt flashed through his eyes, because he could tell with a glance that Yi Xian was only a grand unity Xian immortal. If he wanted to kill Yi Xian, it would only be a matter of time. If the Fairy of Guanghan was not here, and Yi Xian had the Jade Clear Talisman decree, Yang Jian would have taught Yi Xian a lesson, since they were both from the clan of enlightenment. But now, the Fairy of Guanghan was beside him. In order to show his cultivation, Yang Jian would not let Yi Xian go so easily. Some people might ask, how can the war god of the three realms Yang Jian be so arrogant now? How can he be worthy of his identity? In fact, Yang Jian was an extremely cold and wise person. He would not find trouble with Yi Xian if it was something else. But since ancient times, heroes could not resist the charms of beautiful women. In front of the Fairy of Guanghan, Yang Jian completely lost his wisdom and calmness. He only wanted to show his martial prowess in front of the Fairy of Guanghan. "Are you Yi Xian?" Yang Jian strode toward Yi Xian, making the other immortals look at him. "This humble Taoist is Yi Xian." Yi Xian bowed his head and spoke in a neither humble nor arrogant manner. "I heard that you once killed Primordial Demon and made a contribution to the Heaven Realm. You were conferred the title of Demon Slayer Sage Lord. But someone also told me that you sneaked into the Moon Palace when you first entered the Celestial Court. Is this true?" Yang Jian looked down at Yi Xian, and his voice gradually became cold. Since the Fairy of Guanghan was beside him, Yang Jian did not need to hide anything. He could use Yi Xian to express his intentions to the fairy of Guanghan. I have known the fairy of Guanghan since the primordial world. How can I sneak in when we meet an old friend? Yi Xian said calmly in the face of Yang Jian's oppression. Yang Jian snorted and said, Yi Xian, the celestial court has its own rules. Male immortals are not allowed to enter any fairy's residence. If anyone violates this rule, their immortal status will be removed, and they will be banished to the lower realm and become immortal. Don't you know that? Or is it that, as a heavenly deity of the heaven realm, you don't put me in your eyes? Chapter 258. Yang Jian was aggressive, and even used the heavenly rules as an excuse to make things difficult for Yi Xian. This made the immortal's expressions change. It seemed that Yang Jian was going to be ruthless to Yi Xian today. Junior brother, Yi Daoyu has just entered the celestial court, and doesn't know much about the heavenly rules. Why don't we exempt him from punishment this time? Heavenly Venerable Changsheng forced a smile, and kept winking at Yi Xian. It was obvious that he was telling Yi Xian to bow down and apologize to Yang Jian, so that he could avoid this calamity. At this moment, the Jade Emperor sneered as he watched, but didn't say anything to stop him. The Fairy of the Moon Palace had a strange gaze as she slightly stared at Yi Xian, as if she'd already expected Yi Xian to apologize to Yang Jian. After all, Yang Jian was an all-heaven golden immortal. He was a mighty figure in the three realms. How could Yi Xian, a mere Taixian immortal, be a match for Yang Jian? In fact, the Guanghan fairy came to the celestial court this time to stop Yang Jian for Yi Xian. However, Yi Xian had peeped at her body. Originally, the Guanghan fairy already had a grudge against Yi Xian. At this moment, she could borrow Yang Jian's hands to teach Yi Xian a lesson, but she definitely wouldn't let Yang Jian harm Yi Xian's life. Just when the immortals thought that Yi Xian was going to bow down and apologize to Yang Jian, the next scene made the immortals fall silent and gasp. The smile on Yi Xian's face gradually disappeared. When he opened and closed his eyes, it was as if two big stars were rotating. When he looked at Yang Jian, there was a trace of murderous intent in his eyes. Heavenly rules? Yi Xian smiled coldly and said, Yang Jian, I gave you some face and you still want to open a dye shop. Do you really think I'm afraid of you? Everyone in the three realms has the right to talk to me about the heavenly rules, but you don't. Back then, the Holy Mother of Peach Mountain fell in love with a mortal, and married a mortal. That's how you came into being. Have you forgotten how you became the disciple of a mortal? You ding like a dog under the pursuit of the heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals? That's how you saved your mother by splitting Peach Mountain. Where did you put the heavenly rules at that time? As soon as Yi Xian finished speaking, Yang Jian's originally arrogant expression completely darkened. The terrifying all-heaven immortal light around him was in chaos, causing the Lingxiao Hall to rumble and shake, as if it was about to collapse at any moment. I forgot that your sister, the third Holy Mother of Peach Mountain, was also married to a mortal. But you disregarded your family's kinship. And you disregarded your family's family, and acted as executioner too. And you, but you, and you. How dare a heartless and ungrateful thing like you talk about the heavenly rules with me? Wow. The immortals gasped. They looked at Yi Xian, as if they were looking at a dead man. Everyone in the three realms knew about Yang Jian's history, but no one dared to talk about it. It was Yang Jian's biggest taboo. He saw it as a stain on his life. Not only did the immortals' faces change, but even the goddess of Moon Palace was shocked. She looked at Yi Xian in panic. She blamed Yi Xian in her heart. Was he courting death? The Jade Emperor was livid. He was speechless. This was not only Yang Jian's scandal, but also his own. The Holy Mother of Peach Mountain was his sister. No one would have thought that Yi Xian would be so daring as to expose the scandal of the past. This caused the immortals to look at Yi Xian, as if they were looking at a madman. Good. It was as if the celestial thunder from the 9 heavens was exploding, as if the sun, moon, and stars were exploding. Yang Jian's handsome face was distorted as he looked at Yi Xian with a gaze that had never been seen before. Little Taoist, How dare you humiliate me like this? If I don't destroy your body and soul today, how can I relieve my hatred? Rumble. The all-heaven immortal light shone in all directions. Yang Jian slashed at Yi Xian with his three-pointed double-edged sword. The world was twisted and shattered. It was a terrifying power. Go! Yi Xian's expression was extremely serious as he faced Yang Jian's slash. He formed an incantation with both hands, and his entire body suddenly transformed into a ray of immortal light. He directly disappeared from the Lingxiao Hall, barely dodging Yang Jian's immortal slaying slash. Where do you think you're going? Yang Jian was so angry that he was about to explode. How could he let Yi Xian go? When he took a step forward, the Lingxiao Hall shook. He turned into a beam of immortal light and chased after Yi Xian. Yi Xian is dead meat. The immortals trembled. They set up their clouds. Even the Jade Emperor and the goddess of Moon Palace rose into the air and rushed to the place where the two were fighting. The 33 layers of heaven. The endless sky was shattering. The Jade Palace was collapsing, and the 90,000 kilometers of the heavenly river was rolling backwards. Yang Jian moved as fast as lightning, and every swing of his blade seemed to be able to destroy everything. As for Yi Xian, he frantically fled, dodging Yang Jian's pursuit in an extremely sorry state. It was not that Yi Xian did not want to fight Yang Jian head-on, but the gap between their realms was too big. One was an all-heaven golden immortal, while the other was a primordial unity mystic immortal. They were like an elephant and an ant. There was no comparison at all. Moreover, Yi Xian could feel that he could not withstand every slash of Yang Jian's. The power of an all-heaven golden immortal would severely injure him in an instant. However, Yi Xian was extremely calm. Since he dared to appear in front of Yang Jian, he was confident that he could face him. It was obviously impossible to fight him head-on. He was just waiting for an opportunity to attack. There was only one chance. If he could severely injure Yang Jian, he would be able to kill him. Splash! 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 The Milky Way rumbled and rolled. Yi Xian's hair was disheveled. His body was covered in cracks, and blood was flowing from the corner of his mouth. It was obvious that even though Yi Xian didn't fight Yang Jian head-on, just the all-heaven immortal light that Yang Jian had slashed out was enough to heavily injure him. Buzz! The air froze and Yi Xian stopped fleeing. He stood above the heavenly river and turned around to look at Yang Jian. A wisp of mournful and malicious killing intent quietly flashed through his eyes. Slash! Yang Jian flew across the sky, his face flushed red from anger. His three-pointed, double-edged blade suddenly slashed out with all-heaven immortal light, violently slashing towards the center of Yi Xian's brows. Soul-subduing banner! Yi Xian roared to the sky. As he waved his hand, the billion soul-subduing banner surged out. Billions of dead souls whizzed out, and met the all-heaven immortal light head-on with the power of heaven and earth. Sizzle! Although the billions of souls were terrifying, they melted like snow in the spring when faced with the all-heaven immortal light. The saber light that pierced through the heavens and the earth directly slashed the myriad soul-suppressing banner into two, and its remaining might didn't decrease as it slashed onto Yi Xian's body. Slash! The sound of a blade piercing into flesh could be heard. A terrifying wound appeared on Yi Xian's chest. His flesh was rolling, and the ribs in his chest could be faintly seen. At this moment, a large amount of blood spurted out. Pfft! A mouthful of blood sprayed out from Yi Xian's mouth. His face was like golden paper, and the Tai-E immortal light around him shattered at this moment. His entire body was dyed in blood as he fell towards the heavenly river below. Chapter 259. Perfected Cultivator. Please don't kill him, Fairy Guanghan said anxiously as she arrived on a cloud. Hearing what Fairy Guanghan said, Yang Jian's killing intent subsided. He waved his hand and a terrifying deity aura spread out, immediately sucking Yi Xian over. Ugh! A muffled groan came out of Yi Xian's mouth. Yang Jian grabbed onto Yi Xian's neck with one hand and lifted him into the air, as if he was lifting a chicken. His 5 fingers were slightly tightening, as if he was going to twist Yi Xian's neck and kill him in the next moment. Meanwhile, the group of immortals and the Jade Emperor floated over. When they saw this scene, everyone's expressions were different. but they looked at Yi Xian as if they were looking at a dead person. Perfected cultivator, I owe this Taoist a favor. Please spare his life. The fairy of the Moon Palace bowed and pleaded in a pleading tone. He was the top war god of the three realms, the top disciple of the third generation of the Chan sect, and the perfected cultivator Erling Xiansheng. His name was Yang Jian, a man who was destined to be extraordinary. He had few enemies in the 3 realms and 6 realms. Yi Xian, you're truly pitiful. You actually allowed a woman to plead for you to avoid death. Today, I, the true monarch, will not kill you for the sake of the Moon Fairy. However, you must remember that from now on, don't provoke the Moon Fairy. If there's a next time, I'll let you know what it means to live a life worse than death. Yang Jian said coldly, and let go of Yi Xian. There was disdain in his eyes. Thank you, perfected cultivator. Fairy Guanghan bowed, and finally felt relieved. She had saved Yi Xian, so she had repaid Yi Xian's favor. Perfected cultivator, you're invincible in the 3 realms. I've seen it today. Perfected cultivator, who in the 3 realms can defeat you? Your Majesty, please hold a cloud wave banquet to welcome true Lord to the celestial court. At this moment, all the immortals were smiling flatteringly as they expressed their goodwill towards Yang Jian. No one paid any attention to Yi Xian. After all, Yi Xian had offended Yang Jian and was a complete and utter failure. So, would anyone in the 3 dimensions dare to befriend him? The Jade Emperor watched coldly from the side. The immortals all expressed their goodwill. Yang Jian stood proudly above the heavenly river. Only Yi Xian was covered in blood and his eyes drooped. He looked like a loser that everyone ignored. All of a sudden, rumble. The heaven and earth within 100 million miles were shaking violently. The 33 layers of heaven were dark and lightless, while the water of the Milky Way was rolling. A beam of Tongtian devil light descended from the 33 layers of heaven, covering Yi Xian's blood-soaked body. It was a demonic aura that could shake the past and present. It was a murderous light. Yi Xian was bathed in the Tongtian devil light as he rose from the void. His broken body was healing, and his glabella was glowing. Yang Jian, do you think you've won? Suddenly, just as the immortals were praising Yang Jian, Yi Xian's cold voice sounded. Yang Jian's expression changed when he saw such a terrifying phenomenon. He also saw Yi Xian's strange and fierce aura. An extremely bad feeling appeared in his heart. Buzz! A 3-inch halberd surged out from Yi Xian's glabella. The heaven-destroying halberd expanded in the wind until it became 3 feet long. Yi Xian held the halberd in his hand. Chaotic sky halberd technique, first move, heaven smiting. It was as if an ancient demon god was roaring, as if an ancient demon from beyond the heavens was roaring. Yi Xian was silent, but a boundless and emotionless voice sounded out from within the 33 heavens. Bang! 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 The heavenly river rolled back and the stars exploded. Yi Xian's black hair fluttered in the wind. When he opened and closed his eyes, they turned pale white. The heaven-destroying halberd in his hand released a fierce aura that had never been seen before. Bang! Heaven and earth shattered and everything was annihilated. A black light pierced through the past and present, destroying heaven and earth. It instantly shattered the all-heaven celestial light around Yang Jian. The cold and terrifying tip of the halberd pierced through his chest and nailed him in the void. Like a god, like an immortal, like a demon, Yi Xian walked forward in the void. With every step he took, heaven and earth shook violently. It was a terrifying sight. Yi Xian's eyes were pale and emotionless. He slowly pulled the heaven-destroying halberd out of Yang Jian's chest, bringing with it a large amount of golden blood. Yang Jian howled in pain. He looked at Yi Xian with a look of anger that had never been seen before. He used all his strength to activate the arts of 8-9, wanting to kill Yi Xian right there and then. Unfortunately, after suffering Yi Xian's killing blow, Yang Jian was already heavily injured and on the verge of death. Furthermore, he was suppressed by the fierce aura emitted by the heaven-punishing halberd, causing him to be unable to attack Yi Xian. Yi Xian was very calm from the beginning to the end. He endured Yang Jian's merciless attacks, and endured Yang Jian's extreme humiliation. He was just waiting for an opportunity to kill Yang Jian. Yi Xian knew that if he fought Yang Jian head-on, Even with the heaven-destroying halberd in his hand, he wouldn't be Yang Jian's match. He could only use himself as bait to get close to Yang Jian and launch this fatal blow. Obviously, he succeeded. This was the opportunity he had been waiting for. Perhaps some people would say that Yi Xian was too despicable and shameless. However, Yang Jian was an all-heaven golden immortal. He was 3 whole realms below Yi Xian. How could he not be shameless? Yi Xian calmly attacked before the shocked eyes of the immortals and the Guanghan fairy. However, this wasn't the end. If Yi Xian only managed to injure Yang Jian, this was definitely not the result that Yi Xian wanted. 8 arts of the inverse demon. The black light that filled the sky was like a group of stars shining in the sky. Yi Xian's expression was sinister and extremely poisonous. He took a step forward and violently slashed the heavenly punishing halberd towards Yang Jian. The terrifying and fierce demonic light directly pierced dozens of bloody holes through Yang Jian's body. Buzz! The void shook and the universe shifted. Yi Xian's face was ferocious. A terrifying suction force appeared in his palms and fingers. Before Yang Jian's body fell into the heavenly river below, he suddenly sucked Yang Jian's body over. Bang! His palms were like the sky, suppressing everything. Yi Xian pressed his palms on Yang Jian's head. He looked at Yang Jian with a cruel and violent gaze. The world was silent, and there was no sound. Yi Xian's series of attacks only took a moment. However, the Guanghan fairy and the other immortals were stunned speechless. It was as if they couldn't believe what they were seeing. Yi Xian, stop. The Guanghan fairy's face was pale. She had already recovered from the shock. Her voice was trembling as she hurriedly rode a cloud towards Yi Xian. Get lost! The heaven-destroying halberd shook the sky and brought along the Tongtian demonic light. Before the Guanghan fairy could reach him, Yi Xian sent her flying. The Guanghan fairy spat out a mouthful of blood. The heavenly light around her was extremely dim. The heaven-destroying halberd was the #1 killing weapon in all of history. This wasn't just for show. Under the control of Yi Xian's Tai Xian immortal cultivation, he could already unleash 20% of its power. How could the Guanghan fairy withstand it? Fairy, the Jade Emperor's face changed. He didn't expect Yi Xian to be so ruthless as to attack the Guanghan fairy. As he waved his palms, a beam of heavenly light shot out and froze the Guanghan fairy in the void. However, when he saw the heaven-destroying halberd in Yi Xian's hands, his eyes were filled with fear. Could this be? The Jade Emperor's teeth were chattering, and his eyes were filled with fear. He had already guessed what the weapon in Yi Xian's hands was. Chapter 260. No one noticed the Jade Emperor's uncertain expression, nor did they notice what the Heavenfall halberd was. The immortals were already in a mess, their eyes focused on Yi Xian and Yang Jian. The fact that the #1 war god of the 3 realms, Yang Jian, had been defeated by a mere Taoist was simply inconceivable to the immortals. They deeply understood that Yang Jian was an all-heaven golden immortal, and was only 1 step away from the perfected golden immortal realm. At this moment, Yi Xian's left hand held onto the halberd as his right hand grabbed onto Yang Jian's head. An extremely sinister killing intent coiled around his body, while Yang Jian's entire body was bathed in blood. His body was in tatters, and dozens of bloody holes appeared all over his body, causing him to look extremely miserable. Yi Xian, you can't kill me. Yang Jian smiled miserably, looking at Yi Xian with pride. He didn't beg for mercy even though he was in Yi Xian's hands. He was the Erlang Sage, the war god of the 3 realms. Even if his soul was destroyed, he wouldn't beg for mercy. This was Yang Jian's pride and dignity. I have to say, you are my greatest enemy. If I fight you head-on, I won't be your match. Unfortunately, the winner takes all, and your only fate is death. Yi Xian narrowed his eyes. Tiny immortal light shone from his palms as he looked at Yang Jian with ruthless killing intent. In fact, Yi Xian didn't dislike Yang Jian's arrogance, because Yang Jian was an all-heaven golden immortal. He had the right to be arrogant. However, Yi Xian also disdained Yang Jian's arrogance. It was his arrogance and conceit that gave him the chance to kill him. Now, he was also facing the fate of having his soul scattered. Yang Jian, let me send you on your last journey. Yi Xian had to be ruthless to his enemies. He had to kill them all without leaving any future trouble. This was his principle, and there had never been an exception. He didn't waste any more words. Tiny immortal light shone from his hand on Yang Jian's head and crushed his nascent spirit. No! Lord Changsheng and the Moon Fairy cried out in alarm. Unfortunately, no one could stop Yi Xian from killing Yang Jian. Bang! The tiny celestial light wreaked havoc in Yang Jian's body and was about to crush his primordial spirit. However, at this moment a great change occurred. With a deafening roar that shook the void, a black divine hound suddenly appeared behind Yi Xian. Its sharp claws glowed with terrifying primordial immortal light as they slammed violently and ruthlessly toward Yi Xian's back. Bang! With a loud bang, Yi Xian was ambushed and instantly sent flying. The tiny celestial light around him shattered, proving how serious the blow was. Howling celestial dog. The immortals were in an uproar. Only now did they recall that Yang Jian had a primeval beast by his side, the howling celestial dog. It had followed Yang Jian to conquer the 3 dimensions since the primeval times. And this man and dog were inseparable. Never had they imagined that it would actually save Yang Jian's life at this critical moment. Buzz! The void trembled and ripples spread. Yi Xian flew back and fixed his body in the void. When he looked back at Yang Jian, he saw Yang Jian smiling coldly at him. Beside him, a black divine hound was staring at him ferociously. 8-9 mysteries. The heavens shook and the void exploded. With Yang Jian as the center, terrifying all heaven's celestial light covered him. His broken body was rapidly regenerating. When the all-heaven celestial light dissipated, his body was intact and the 3-pointed, double-edged sword in his hand appeared in front of Yi Xian's eyes. Such a scene caused Yi Xian's eyes to slightly narrow, and his expression gradually darkened. The 8-9 mysteries is worthy of its reputation. It's a method of sanctification. Moreover, Yang Jian is an all-heaven golden immortal. As long as a trace of his primordial spirit is not destroyed, he can regenerate his body. Although Yi Xian's weapon is strange, there is a gap of 3 realms between him and Yang Jian. I'm afraid he may not be a match for him. That's right. It's really rare for this Taoist to injure Yang Jian, but he doesn't know that all heaven golden immortals are not that simple. Stepping into this realm means that one is immortal. As long as a little Yuan Ling is alive, he can regenerate his body. Don't forget that Yang Jian was careless just now. That's why he was defeated by Yi Xian. He hasn't even used the 36 Heavenly Dipper transformations yet. The immortals looked askance and discussed animatedly. Each of them had lived for hundreds of thousands of years, and naturally had extraordinary knowledge. They also had an extraordinary understanding of the all-heaven golden immortal realm. Although they were amazed by Yi Xian, the gap between their cultivation levels was obvious. Although Yi Xian had injured Yang Jian with a sneak attack, now that Yang Jian had recovered, Yi Xian would probably die at Yang Jian's hands. Yi Xian, I have to say that if I give you more time, I'm afraid even I won't be a match for you. Unfortunately, you won't have the chance anymore. Yang Jian stood in the air as his arrogant expression disappeared. He finally treated Yi Xian as a true opponent, because he almost died at Yi Xian's hands just now. If it wasn't for the howling celestial dog's sneak attack that allowed him to escape from Yi Xian's hands, his soul would have been annihilated long ago. Buzz! The 3-pointed double-edged blade pointed at Yi Xian from afar. The all-heaven immortal light covered the sky and covered the earth. Yang Jian finally started to get serious, and put away his contempt for Yi Xian. As his eyes rotated, a trace of fear flashed through his eyes as he looked at Yi Xian. He was not afraid of Yi Xian's cultivation level, but Yi Xian's ruthless mind, and the heaven-destroying halberd in his hand. Although Yang Jian was arrogant, he wasn't stupid. Just now, because of his own arrogance, he allowed Yi Xian to approach him, and even used the strange weapon in his hand to heavily injure him to the point of death. Yang Jian asked himself, ever since the battle of godhood, he had never tasted the taste of death again. However, in that short moment just now, he felt the arrival of death. This feeling was so terrifying that it made Yang Jian's heart tremble. He knew that he could not let Yi Xian live today. If Yi Xian was given more time to grow, he would definitely die at the hands of Yi Xian one day. Immortal, you can destroy his cultivation level, but please spare his life. Fairy Guanghan bowed from afar and pleaded to Yang Jian. Yang Jian shook his head slowly in response to Fairy Guanghan's request and said apologetically, Fairy, Yang Jian does not agree. If I don't kill him today, I will definitely die at his hands in the future. Hiss! As soon as Yang Jian finished speaking, the immortals sucked in a breath of cold air. No one thought that Yang Jian would actually give Yi Xian such a great evaluation, and actually view him as his greatest enemy. In the distant past, Yang Jian had never treated Yi Xian with such an attitude, even when facing the lawless monkey. Could it be that Yi Xian's potential was greater than that monkey's? At this moment, the goddess of the Moon Palace bit her lips. She had not expected Yang Jian to reject her request. This was something that had never happened before. She could only smile bitterly, unable to say anything. Chapter 261. Ha! All of a sudden, Yi Xian sneered. He looked at the goddess of Guanghan with disdain and said, Goddess of Guanghan, you are so ignorant. Do you really think he can kill me? Buzz! The heavens could not be destroyed, and the earth could not be buried. The heaven-destroying halberd in Yi Xian's hand buzzed. The murderous aura that broke through the heavens shook the 33 heavens. Yi Xian pointed the halberd at Yang Jian and said in a strange and cruel voice, Yang Jian, if I were you, I would have fled to the lower realm instead of putting on a show here. As soon as Yi Xian finished speaking, Yang Jian's body trembled. A trace of astonishment flashed through his eyes as he looked at Yi Xian, but it quickly disappeared. The immortals did not know that although Yang Jian looked unharmed, he was just putting on a strong front. One had to know that the heavenly punishing halberd was the #1 killing weapon in all of history. Yi Xian had pierced through Yang Jian's body and injured his source long ago. He seemed to be unparalleled in power, but in reality, he could only unleash 30% of his cultivation as an all-heaven golden immortal. Yi Xian naturally understood the power of the heaven-destroying halberd. He could tell that Yang Jian was putting on a show. Yang Jian only wanted to use 30% of his strength as an all-heaven golden immortal to kill Yi Xian here. Cut the crap. Only one of us can survive today. He slashed out with his three-pointed double-edged saber, creating a 300,000-foot-long blade light that slashed towards Yi Xian. Although the blazing all-heaven immortal light was dim, it still contained 30% of Yang Jian's strength. You think you can kill me? Yi Xian coldly roared. He'd long since seen through Yang Jian's current cultivation, and there wasn't the slightest trace of fear on his face. The heavenly punishing halberd swung the heavens, and when the halberd blasted out, it carried a monstrous black light as it violently smashed towards Yang Jian. Rumble! When the two powerful forces collided, the water of the heavenly river for 90,000 miles was swept into the void. In the next moment, the two of them fought in the sky. Heavenly Astral 36 transformations. Yang Jian roared again and again. The all-heaven celestial light transformed into a 10,000-meter-long celestial dragon that stretched across heaven and earth. Its 1,000-meter-long dragon claws violently swiped at Yi Xian, as if it wanted to tear him to shreds. Transcendence World. Yi Xian's roar shattered mountains and rivers, causing the heavens and earth to turn upside down. His hands formed seals as he unleashed a secret technique from the undying immortal scripture. His body expanded violently until he was 30,000 meters tall. When he punched out, he sent the heavenly dragon flying. Martial Arts Dragon Mastery. After Yi Xian used his Dharma idol, his 30,000-meter body emitted a terrifying immortal light. He even used a killing technique that he had never used before as he violently charged towards the 30,000-meter-long heavenly dragon that Yang Jian had transformed into. What was the dragon mastery of martial arts? The martial arts fighting technique was a secret technique of the sorcerer tribe. After using it, one could kill a 9-clawed golden dragon in the 9 heavens. In the distant past, there was an ancient sorcerer who tore apart a sky dragon and ate it. It could be said that he was invincible in the untainted land. Bang! 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 Yi Xian swung the heaven-destroying halberd with one hand and clenched his other hand into a fist, madly attacking the heavenly dragon. Golden blood dyed the sky as dragon roars rang out incessantly. Yang Jian transformed into a 30,000-meter-long heavenly dragon, and a divine dragon swung its tail as it fiercely lashed onto Yi Xian's chest, causing his body to rupture and spit out a mouthful of blood essence. However, the heavenly slaying halberd had also pierced through the heavenly dragon's body, causing it to roar miserably. Bang! 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 Yi Xian seemed to have gone mad as he ignored the dragon's tail violently attacking his body. His two fists were like the stars in the sky as they violently smashed towards the dragon's head. The golden blood that splashed out was even more tragic and beautiful. Roar! In the face of Yi Xian's frenzied attacks, the heavenly dragon that Yang Jian had transformed into wrapped around Yi Xian's body. The terrifying dragon claws that were emitting immortal light also violently slapped Yi Xian's body. Blood splattered across the sky as the heavens and earth shook. The immortals watched in horror as the towering giant that Yi Xian had transformed into, and the heavenly dragon that Yang Jian had transformed into attacked each other. The tragic scene was extremely terrifying. The Tiangang 36 transformations can change everything in the world. It is one of the Taoist superpowers, and has incredible power. Only the 72 Disha transformations can compete with it. However, what technique is Yi Xian using? Why have I never seen it before? Heavenly Lord Chang Sheng exclaimed in surprise. Dharma world, the sorcerer tribe's superpowers. If I'm not wrong, Yi Xian is using the martial arts fighting technique of the sorcerer tribe. I didn't expect Yi Xian to have the sorcerer tribe's secret technique. The Jade Emperor narrowed his eyes and his voice was extremely serious. Sorcerer tribe's superpowers? The immortals were in an uproar and everyone's face was pale. Could Yi Xian be from the sorcerer tribe? An immortal exclaimed in horror. No, he doesn't have the aura of the sorcerer tribe on him. He is indeed an immortal said with certainty. While the immortals were discussing, the battle between the two in the sky had come to an end. After a loud bang, Yi Xian's body returned to normal size, and the heavenly dragon transformed into Yang Jian's appearance. Yi Xian was bathed in blood and panted heavily. The tiny immortal light around him was extremely dim. On the other hand, Yang Jian's hair was disheveled, and there were many bruises on his face. His entire body was dripping with blood. He no longer had the power of the number one war god of the three realms. The immortals were stunned by this scene. They couldn't understand why Yang Jian, an all-heaven golden immortal, couldn't take down Yi Xian. Your Majesty, what's going on? Venus Taibai asked. The Jade Emperor smiled coldly and said, My nephew is too arrogant. His origin was injured by Yi Xian, and he can only use 30% of his cultivation. However, he wants to kill Yi Xian so badly that he is now fighting Yi Xian with his life. The Jade Emperor was in a good mood. These two were thorns in his flesh, and he was happy to see them both injured. Perfected immortals, let's end this sparring here. Let's not hurt each other. Fairy Guang Han frowned slightly. She didn't expect things to turn out this way. This was definitely not the result she wanted to see. If they were to continue fighting, one of them would definitely die. Fairy, step back. After I kill him, I will drink and chat with you. Yang Jian's face was ferocious, and blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. He couldn't lose to Yi Xian, and he couldn't let Fairy Guang Han see him as a joke. If he didn't kill Yi Xian today, not only would his reputation be damaged, but he would also leave an impression of a loser in front of Fairy Guang Han. This was definitely not the result he wanted. From the beginning to the end, Yang Jian had been speaking gently to the Fairy of Guang Han. It was obvious that he was deeply infatuated with the Fairy of Guang Han, but this scene caused Yi Xian to feel extreme disdain. Yang Jian, you are the number one war god of the three realms of all heaven golden immortals. However, in my opinion, you are just a piece of trash. Pitiful and sad. If I had your cultivation, I would have pressed Fairy Guang Han under me and ravaged her to my heart's content. Who cares if she is willing or not? How dare you? Yang Jian's expression froze for a moment as he roared at Yi Xian. Insulting his beloved like this simply made his heart explode from anger. His gaze towards Yi Xian was filled with unimaginable killing intent. Yi Xian, you are shameless. Fairy Guanghan was stunned and scolded Yi Xian angrily. She didn't expect Yi Xian to humiliate her like this. Chapter 262. Shameless. Yi Xian coldly smiled and said, I have to say, after seeing Fairy Guanghan's exquisite jade body that day, I couldn't sleep at all. If I had Yang Jian's cultivation that day, I would definitely have kissed Fairy Guanghan and felt the beauty of the number one beauty of the three realms. Silence. Silence. Dead silence. When Yi Xian finished speaking, the immortals were stunned. The Jade Emperor's body trembled, and his face turned red. The fairy of Guanghan's immortal light was in a mess. Although her face was covered by a veil, and no one could see her expression, her eyes were filled with shame and anger. Yi Xian's words, whether intentional or unintentional, revealed the fact that he'd seen the jade body of the moon fairy. This kind of fantasy was simply unimaginable to the immortals, and it caused the immortals and the Jade Emperor to be speechless. At this moment, Yang Jian stared at the fairy of Guanghan. Even his voice was trembling. He said, Fairy, is he telling the truth? Yi Xian, you are shameless. The fairy of Guanghan had never been humiliated like this. Tears welled up in her eyes. She summoned a cloud and disappeared. Unfortunately, Yi Xian did not care about the fairy of Guanghan's curses. Because the fairy of Guanghan was just a tool in his eyes. He was just making the best use of her. Yang Jian, let me tell you, I have already gotten the fairy of Guanghan's body. Yi Xian's simple words not only caused Yang Jian to be stunned speechless, even the Jade Emperor and the other immortals seemed to have turned into puppets. An extremely strange atmosphere spread throughout the world. Now, Yi Xian's eyes focused as the heavenly punishing halberd released a terrifying aura. He took a step forward, and without waiting for Yang Jian to recover from his daze, the cold tip of the halberd ruthlessly pierced through Yang Jian's heart. Die! Yi Xian held the heaven-destroying halberd in his hand and roared savagely. He poured what little power he had left in his body into the halberd. An extremely terrifying and ferocious aura exploded with a bang and instantly blasted Yang Jian into a bloody mist. That's right. Yi Xian had spouted so much nonsense just to make Yang Jian lose his mind. Only then would he be able to scatter his soul and kill him. And this was Yi Xian's true motive. There was no such thing as despicable and shameless. Only the winner takes all. Even though he had the heaven-destroying halberd, a golden immortal of all heaven was still a golden immortal of all heaven. Even though Yang Jian was seriously injured and could only use 30% of his power, it was still not something that Yi Xian could withstand. Everything was over. Yi Xian's entire body was trembling. He had racked his brains and used every conceivable method he could think of to overcome this calamity of life and death. But in the end, he had managed to overcome it. Call him despicable and shameless. Call him heartless. Yi Xian only wanted to live, not die under Yang Jian's blade. That was all. Eye of heaven and earth Dharma. All of a sudden, heaven and earth buzzed with each word. Before Yi Xian could recover, a tightly shut vertical eye appeared in the sky. Immediately, the 33 layers of the celestial court shook violently. Oh no! Looking at this scene, the Jade Emperor suddenly came to his senses. Only he knew what had happened. His face was already pale, and his eyes were frozen. He did not care about the immortals around him. His hands formed a supreme immortal art, causing the 33 layers of the celestial court to erect a protective formation. Yi Xian, I want you to never be reincarnated. The sky exploded and everything collapsed. Yang Jian's cold voice echoed between heaven and earth. The vertical eye in the sky slowly opened. The eye of heaven and earth, the immortal light of destruction. These were Yang Jian's innate divine powers, and also his greatest trump card. It was also his most powerful attack. It was an old legend. Yang Jian was the product of man and immortal. When he was born, he was bestowed with 3 eyes. There were 9 immortal lights of destruction in his eyes. Even Dalio Jingxian did not dare to take them head-on. Even during the investiture of the gods, Yang Jian had never used his eye of heaven and earth. This was because every time he used the immortal light of destruction, his origin would be damaged, and he would no longer be able to reach the Sage-to-be realm. Today Yi Xian destroyed his physical body and scattered his soul. However, under the protection of the Eye of Heaven and Earth, Yang Jian's true spirit was not destroyed. This completely enraged him. In the end, he disregarded his Tongtian immortal Tao and wanted to use the immortal light of destruction to kill Yi Xian. Break! A spot of immortal light fell from the Eye of Heaven and Earth. Everything was distorted. Countless immortal islands and palaces turned into ashes. Some immortals who could not dodge in time were hit by the aftershock of the immortal light of destruction. Their souls were scattered between heaven and earth. At this moment, Yi Xian's expression was mournful and unwilling. He could feel that death was coming for him. He did not expect that he would still be defeated by Yang Jian after using all his means. The immortal light of destruction was too terrifying. It was a gift from heaven and earth to Yang Jian. No one could survive under the immortal light of destruction. Even the Jade Emperor stopped hiding his cultivation and activated the Celestial Protection Array to protect the entire Celestial Court. "You're still too early to kill me," Yi Xian roared at the sky. His eyes were wild and sinister. His hands moved endlessly as he formed an unimaginable immortal art. Boundless heaven and earth inverted, with the weapon as the body and blood as the spirit. Quick! When Yi Xian used the forbidden immortal art, he bled from his 7 orifices, and his entire body shot out a bloody mist that filled the sky. He was like an evil spirit that crawled out of hell, terrifying and frightening. The bloody mist that filled the sky dyed the heaven-punishing halberd a mournful and blood-red color, and it even emitted a bloody light that covered Yi Xian within. "Man and halberd is one!" Yi Xian roared violently as the immortal light of annihilation approached him. Instantly, the 90,000 kilometers of heavenly river turned into endless water vapor, and the sound of everything collapsing could be heard. The heavens were pierced through. Golden blood flowed from Yang Jian's Dharma Eye of Heaven and Earth. Then it disappeared into the sky. His primordial spirit was extremely weak and had fallen into a coma. The celestial hound whimpered and carried Yang Jian's broken primordial spirit. It turned into a terrifying immortal light and fled towards the lower realm. Obviously, it was afraid that some immortals would take advantage of the situation and destroy Yang Jian's broken primordial spirit. Yi Xian's body was tattered and lifeless. It was unknown if he was alive or dead, but the heavenly punishing halberd revolved around him and carried a monstrous ferocious aura to protect his body as he fell from the 33rd level of the heaven realm to the lower realms. At this moment, when the Jade Emperor saw this, his eyes flashed with a terrifying killing intent. He wanted to catch up with the two of them and kill them one by one. However, the heaven-protecting formation had been activated. Without the support of his immortal chi, the aftermath of the battle between the two of them would bring an unimaginable catastrophe to the heaven realm. Moreover, after much consideration, the Jade Emperor gave up the idea of killing the two of them. This was because Yang Jian was the disciple of Immortal Yu Ding and the first disciple of the 3rd generation of the Chan sect. If he could not kill Yang Jian, and was discovered by the 12 ancient golden immortals, he would suffer an unimaginable catastrophe. As for the heaven-punishing halberd in Yi Xian's hand, it caused the Jade Emperor to feel extreme fear. If he were to provoke this weapon to protect its master and erupt with an apocalyptic might, his soul would scatter and he would die. The shocking battle ended with Yi Xian and Yang Jian both injured. However, the enmity between the two of them had been formed. In the future, one of them would die. Chapter 263. Don't worry about not having friends in the future. Who in the world doesn't know you? Yang Jian was the most dazzling star in the 3 realms. He had many titles and many legends. Lord Erlang was the god of war in the 3 realms, the #1 disciple of the 3rd generation of the Chan school, and the god of law enforcement of the Celestial Court. Everyone in the 3 realms heard Yang Jian's name. Yi Xian was a nameless person. No one had heard of his name except for killing Primordial Demon and being conferred the title of Lord Erlang by the Jade Emperor. However, After the shocking battle in the heaven realm spread, Yi Xian was known by everyone in the three realms. They were even discussing who Yi Xian was. In the past, even when facing that lawless monkey, he was still in an invincible position. However, it was precisely this kind of proud son of the heavens that ended up with his body annihilated. Even a little bit of his true spirit had fled to the lower realms under the protection of the howling celestial dog, and the culprit was this Taoist Yi Xian. Although Yi Xian's life and death were unknown, his result was not better than Yang Jian's. The battle between the two of them did not determine the winner, but it ended with both of them suffering. Regardless of the countless demon kings in the earth immortal world, the bodhisattvas and Buddhas in the West Mountain Great Thunderclap Temple, or the immortals of the Chan School and Jie School were already familiar with Yi Xian's name. Yi Xian and Yang Jian were evenly matched. This was already a fantasy. This also proved Yi Xian's terrifying cultivation. Although the immortals of the celestial court spread the news that Yi Xian was only a grand unity mystic immortal, everyone in the three realms did not believe it. They all thought that it was just a rumor. If Yi Xian was really a grand unity mystic immortal, he would not even be able to take one move from Yang Jian, an all-heaven golden immortal. He would be beaten to death. Therefore, regardless of whether it was the demon kings or the bodhisattvas or Buddhas, even the immortals of the Chan School and Jie School all thought that Yi Xian must be an all-heaven golden immortal. He was in the same realm as Yang Jian, Jade Spring Mountain Golden Afterglow Cave. This was the Tao venue of one of the 12 ancient golden immortals, perfected Jade Cauldron. As one of the 12 ancient golden immortals, needless to say, perfected Yu Ding's cultivation was an extremely terrifying existence. However, this old man was a peaceful person. He did not fight or snatch, nor did he have an undeserved reputation. He stayed in seclusion in Jade Spring Mountain all year round to cultivate Tao. It could be said that he was a transcendent Daoyuo Jingxian. However, today, Golden Cloud's cave's immortal light was shining brightly, and sighs could be heard continuously. Erlang, I've told you long ago that there are hidden dragons and crouching tigers in the three realms. You have to tread on thin ice when you cultivate and seek the Tao. That Taoist Yi Xian's background is unknown, and he even has your Grandmaster Yu Qing's talisman decree. Why did you have to provoke him and bear such a terrible consequence with him? Taoist Yu Ding's hair and beard were all white, and his words were slightly reprimanding. Yang Jian pointed at Yuan Ling, who was floating in the immortal spring. His physical body had been destroyed, and the voice that came from his true spirit was extremely weak. Master, that Yi Xian is despicable and shameless. He bullied me too much. Not only did he insult my background, but he also blasphemed against the fairy of Guanghan. If I don't kill him, it will be difficult to eliminate the hatred in my heart. You evil creature! Perfected Yu Ding's hair and beard were all standing up, and great anger appeared on his face. He reprimanded. I've told you long ago that you shouldn't provoke the fairy of Guanghan. Although her cultivation is ordinary, she has a great relationship with the Wu tribe. Have you forgotten who shot down the 9 great golden crows during the Great Witch Demon Tribulation? You evil creature! It seems that I've been too arrogant and indulgent of you. Now you've become arrogant. Do you know how vast the 3 realms of heaven and earth are? Do you really think that no one in the 3 realms dares to provoke the clan of Chan after their great victory in the battle of investiture of the gods? The more perfected Yu Ding spoke, the angrier he became. He kept pacing back and forth in the Golden Cloud's cave, and then pointed at the immortal spring, directly trapping Yang Jian's true spirit in it. From today onwards, you will condense your physical body in this immortal spring. I'll punish you by confining you for 10,000 years. When you step into the Daoyuo Jingxian, you can come out of seclusion, perfected Yu Ding said with disappointment. Master, that Taoist Yi Xian must not be left alive. If I don't kill him, he will definitely kill me in the future. Master, please don't imprison me here. Yang Jian's voice was anxious, and he begged perfected Yu Ding. You evil creature! Why are you still so stupid? Although I don't know why your Grandmaster gave the Jade Clear Talisman to Yi Xian, I can already peek into the unfathomable mysteries of heaven. This Yi Xian must be a key figure in the immeasurable calamity. How can you kill him? He is only a primordial unity Xian immortal now, but he has already injured you to this extent. Although he attacked you sneakily, this also proves that this person is not easy to deal with. Don't provoke him in the future. Perfected Yu Ding was resolute and decisive. He did not give Yang Jian any room for negotiation. He turned and walked out of the Golden Cloud's cave. Outside the Golden Cloud's cave, Perfected Yu Ding looked distressed and sighed repeatedly. Yang Jian was his disciple, and he regarded him as his own son. Now that he was injured like this, how could Perfected Yu Ding not feel distressed? However, with the gradual improvement of his cultivation, Perfected Yu Ding increasingly felt his own insignificance, and that the mysteries of heaven were really unpredictable. Pango opened the sky, Hongjun preached, the three pure ones established the sect, Nuwa created man, the dragon phoenix calamity, the great war of witch demon, the three sovereigns ruled the world, the great war of gods. This world was too vast, and there were too many hidden uncertainties. Although Perfected Yu Ding was Daluo Jingxian, he knew that in fact, although he seemed to be supreme in this world, in the eyes of some people, he was just a chess piece. The world was a chessboard, and all living beings were chess pieces. Even the golden immortals of the great all-embracing heaven were no exception. His disciple was too arrogant. If he did not temper his temperament, he was afraid that in the future immeasurable calamity, he would really die and disappear from the world. Dongsheng Divine Continent Haoshuan Mountain. Haoshuan Mountain covered an area of 1,000,000 miles. In the mountain, there was a Taoist sect called Juhua Immortal. Its sect master called himself Juhua Xian Immortal, and he was an overlord in this area. However, Juhua Xian Immortal's body was a goshawk. Most of his disciples were demons who were dedicated to Taoism. Of course, there were also a large number of human cultivators. The Immortal Gate was wide open, and there was no discrimination in education. This was the principle that the Juhua Immortal sect believed in. On this day, the sky was high and the clouds were light. The sky was clear for thousands of miles. A gust of wind blew, bringing with it a rich fragrance of grass and trees. It made people feel refreshed and relaxed. At the foot of Haoshuan Mountain, more than 10 disciples of the Juhua Immortal sect were rushing back to the sect. These people were mostly young men and women. The highest cultivation level was only at the spirit severing stage, and the weakest was only at the golden core stage. Senior brothers, you guys look. A young girl exclaimed and pointed at a patch of grass by the side of the road in panic. Everyone was stunned. They all looked at the grass and saw a person in the grass. His body was soaked in blood. The blood had already coagulated, and there was no sign of life around him. Chapter 264. A young man quickly arrived before this person and pushed aside the hair that covered this person's face, and then a handsome appearance appeared before his eyes. But under the probing of the young man, this person was already not breathing, and there wasn't the slightest trace of spirit light around this person's body. The young man's eyes spun as he ceaselessly searched this person's body. After an entire 10 breaths of time, the young man said with a dejected expression, "Truly unlucky. This fellow doesn't even have a single magic artifact in his possession." Senior brother Li, he's dead? A disciple of the 9 Radiance Immortal sect probed. The young man laughed with disdain and said, "What's so strange about a dead person in this 500,000 kilometers vast profound mountain? Look at his extremely damaged body. He was surely injured to such an extent by a demon beast, and was exhausted here in the end. All right, let's quickly return to the sect, so that the elders won't be worried about us." The young man called out before leading the group of disciples of the 9 Radiance Immortal sect back to the sect. As for the corpse in the grass, these disciples naturally wouldn't spare it a second glance. After all, in this vast earthly immortal dimension, there was no lack of dead people, so these disciples could be considered to be accustomed to it. "Hey Li Jianglu, why aren't you leaving?" A young woman frowned and reprimanded a young man behind her. "I'm coming. Li Jiangluo's figure was thin, His clothes were slightly simple, and there was a trace of immaturity on his face. His cultivation was merely at the golden core realm, and he seemed to be unable to bear it as he glanced at the corpse in the grass, before quickly catching up to everyone. Ha ha ha. A female disciple laughed with ridicule. Don't all of you know Jianglu? He has an extremely good heart. Even the death of a little rabbit made him sad for a long time. He probably saw how pitiful this person's death was, and wanted to help bury it, right? Jianglu, senior brotherly isn't criticizing you, but you've already entered the sect for 10 years, yet you've only just stepped into the golden core realm. You have to know that the outer court disciple competition is in 3 years. If you're unable to step into the nascent soul realm, then you'll be expelled from the 9 Radiance Immortal sect. Senior brotherly reprimanded with displeasure. That's enough. What's the point of saying so much to this trash? With his current cultivation, how can he step into the nascent soul stage in 3 years? A senior sister said coldly and disdainfully. Li Jiangliu's face was pale while a wisp of mist appeared in his eyes. He forcefully restrained his tears from falling, and he lowered his head and followed behind everyone as they returned to the 9 Radiance Immortal sect. Night fell, and the sky was filled with stars. A thin and weak figure flew through the air on a magic sword. However, his body was slightly unstable. It was obvious that his sword-wielding technique was not that proficient. Found it! Li Jiangliu's small face lit up with joy. He formed a sword seal and swooped down, directly landing beside a bush. After that, he quickly carried the corpse in the bush and rode his sword towards the distance again. In the back mountain of the 9 Radiance Immortal sect, on the Labor Peak. This was a desolate small forest. Under the illumination of the stars that filled the sky, Li Jiangliu's thin and weak figure was reflected. This young man was controlling his spirit sword to dig the ground, and it wasn't long before he dug out a 10 large pit. If this scene was seen by the disciples of the 9 Radiance Immortal sect, they would definitely scold him. A dignified disciple of the 9 Radiance Immortal sect had actually used the spirit sword in his hand to dig a pit. This was simply ruining the reputation of the 9 Radiance Immortal sect. Senior, it's fate that brought us together. I can't bear to see Senior's corpse abandoned in the wilderness, so I can only dig a simple grave for you. You can rest in peace in the netherworld. Li Jianglu bowed 3 times to the corpse while muttering. Obviously, this wasn't the first time he'd done this. After paying his respects to the nameless corpse on the ground, Li Jianglu was about to bury the corpse. However, before he could make a move, the nameless corpse on the ground suddenly moved. The pale palm silently pressed down on the youth's bare feet, and an extremely weak voice sounded out at this moment. Water! Water! The youth Li Jianglu screamed in shock. It was extremely ear-piercing in this empty small forest, but he immediately covered his mouth and tried his best to calm himself down. He's still alive? The youth Li Jianglu muttered to himself with a slightly complicated expression. However, he still carried the nameless corpse on his back, held up his sword, and walked towards his residence. 9 Radiance Immortal Sect Labor Peak. There was a simple stone house, and a bed made of solid wood. Besides that, there was nothing else. Yi Xian's countenance was ghastly pale, while his breathing was extremely weak. He was lying on the bed in a coma. As he looked at Yi Xian's ghastly pale and colorless face, Li Jiangliu's eyes were slightly fearful. However, he still pulled open the water bottle and carefully fed the clear spring water bit by bit into Yi Xian's mouth. Cough. A light cough sounded out from Yi Xian's mouth, and there were even traces of blood that flowed out from the corners of his mouth along with the spring water. He tried his best to open his eyes while the feeling of a myriad of needles piercing his soul came from within, causing Yi Xian's face to warp to the extreme. Pain that tore at his soul caused Yi Xian to forcefully endure it and not howl. He tried his best to support his arms with the intention of standing up. Bang! Yi Xian collapsed weakly on the bed. Large amounts of cold sweat drenched his body. It was obvious that it was extremely strenuous for him to even move now. Yang Jian, what a good destructive immortal light! Yi Xian muttered coldly. The killing intent contained in his voice caused the young man's heart to turn cold. He looked at Yi Xian with even more fear in his eyes. Li Jianglu mustered up his courage and came to Yi Xian's side. His voice was slightly trembling as he said, "You, don't move around. Your injuries are too severe." Yi Xian thought for a moment before he suppressed the violent killing intent in his heart. His eyes narrowed as he looked at Li Jianglu. He knew that it was this young man who had saved him. "Little brother, what's your name and where is this place?" Yi Xian asked calmly. "My name is Li Jianglu. I'm an outer court disciple of the Nine Radiance Immortal sect. This is the labor peak of the Nine Radiance Immortal sect." The young man answered truthfully. However, his gaze towards Yi Xian was slightly curious. "The Nine Radiance Immortal sect?" Yi Xian muttered as he tried his best to recall the scene of his last battle with Yang Jian. Suddenly, Yi Xian recalled that he had used a forbidden technique to become one with the heaven-destroying halberd to barely block Yang Jian's destructive immortal light. After that, he had fallen from the celestial court to the lower realm. "Looks like this is undoubtedly the Earth Immortal realm," Yi Xian muttered to himself. He heaved a sigh of relief. If he had remained in the celestial court with his current injuries, the Jade Emperor would definitely not have let him off. Li Jianglu opened his mouth to ask something as he watched Yi Xian fall into deep thought. However, he swallowed the words that were about to come out of his mouth. He only looked at Yi Xian with a doubtful gaze. At this moment, Yi Xian was constantly inspecting his own body. His brows were tightly knitted together. There was no immortal qi left in his body. Even the slightest use of the power of his primordial spirit caused him extreme pain. Clearly, his injuries were too severe in the battle with Yang Jian. Right now, it was extremely difficult for him to even move his body, let alone use a trace of immortal qi. It was even more difficult for him to open the Sumeru space. Chapter 265. Little brother, I need some medicinal pills to heal my injuries. I wonder if you can. Yi Xian wanted to say something, but hesitated. Asking him to ask for a pill from a junior was indeed a bit embarrassing for Yi Xian. However, he was currently heavily injured. If he didn't borrow the spirit energy from the pill, his injuries would only worsen. From this, it could be seen that Yang Jian had Taoist Yuding to heal him, while Yi Xian could only rely on himself. This was the benefit of having a sect as a backer. Medicinal pills? Li Jianglu bit his lips slightly with hesitation on his face. As an outer court disciple of the Nine Radiance Immortal sect, the sect would distribute 3 portions of spirit energy powder every year. However, he was cowardly by nature. 2 of the 3 portions of spirit energy powder had been taken away by his senior brothers and sisters. The last portion was the foundation of his cultivation. If he gave it to Yi Xian, he would not be able to consume any more spirit energy powder this year. Yi Xian was experienced and had sharp eyes. He could tell with a glance that the young man was in a difficult position. This made him shake his head helplessly. He knew that he was forcing the young man. "This is spirit energy powder. I only have 1 portion. I hope it can be of some help to your injuries." Li Jianglu carefully took out a jade bottle from his bosom and handed it to Yi Xian with a pained expression. Clearly, this spirit energy powder was his most precious item. Looking at the pained expression on the young man's face, Yi Xian looked at the young man with a strange gaze. Then he said calmly, "I can't move now. Please help me consume this spirit energy powder." "Huh. Okay. Li Jianglu opened the jade bottle, and a fragrance drifted out. Although he was extremely reluctant, he still carefully fed the liquid in the bottle to Yi Xian. "Okay." Yi Xian let out a muffled groan as the liquid in his mouth transformed into a strand of spiritual energy that spread throughout his limbs and veins. This caused his numb body to feel extreme pain, but it caused a trace of joy to flash through Yi Xian's eyes. In fact, this spiritual energy powder was just the most common spiritual medicine. If it was under normal circumstances, Yi Xian wouldn't have cared about it at all. But now that he was seriously injured, this little bit of spiritual energy was enough to bring out the vitality in his body. "Little brother, let me borrow your cultivation." Suddenly, Yi Xian narrowed his eyes and sat cross-legged on the bed. A spiritual light grew in his palm, and he pressed his palm against Li Jianglu's dantian. Before Li Jianglu could resist, the spiritual energy in the child's body surged violently into Yi Xian's body. No, no. Feeling the cultivation in his body crazily surging towards Yi Xian, Li Jianglu's face turned pale. He wanted to escape from Yi Xian's control, but Yi Xian used the spiritual energy of the spiritual energy powder to execute the tribulation immortal technique. Although the young man was at the golden core realm, how could he resist Yi Xian? The young man's cultivation fell from the golden core realm to the foundation establishment realm, and from the foundation establishment realm to the 9th level of the Qi refinement realm. When the young man discovered this terrifying situation, he fainted in grief. Open! Ignoring the young man's fainting, Yi Xian formed a seal with 2 fingers. A speck of immortal light was extremely weak, but it still opened the Sumeru space. Yi Xian did not dare to be negligent. He quickly took out a large number of immortal pills from the Sumeru space, grabbed a handful, and threw them into his mouth. Bang! 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 It was as if thunder from the 9 heavens exploded, and it was as if the waves of the vast sea were attacking. When a large number of immortal pills exploded in Yi Xian's body, unimaginable spiritual energy quickly repaired Yi Xian's body and primordial spirit, allowing him to enter cultivation. The next morning, when the young man Li Jianglu slowly opened his eyes, he looked around blankly. When he noticed that Yi Xian was looking at him with a smile, he instantly jumped up from the ground. He even stomped his feet and cursed at Yi Xian angrily. I saved you out of kindness. Not only did I give you spirit energy powder, but you sucked my cultivation. You. When did I suck your cultivation? Yi Xian said calmly. My cultivation? The young man circulated his cultivation technique, and was shocked to discover that the golden core in his body was still there. He had even stepped into the mid-stage of the golden core realm, from the early stage of the golden core realm. This caused his expression to change drastically. He suddenly looked at Yi Xian with extreme surprise in his eyes. What's going on? Li Jianglu clearly remembered that before he fell unconscious, his cultivation had been absorbed by the person before him. But why did his cultivation not fall after he woke up, and it had instead increased greatly? Li Jianglu, quickly come out and get to work. Suddenly, before the young man could ask Yi Xian anything, a shout sounded out from outside the stone house. This caused Li Jianglu's expression to change, and he hurriedly instructed Yi Xian. This is the 9 Radiance Immortal sect. Don't leave if your identity is unknown. If the members of the sect notice you, then not only will you suffer calamity, I'll be implicated as well. The young man, Li Jianglu, instructed repeatedly, and then he hurriedly tidied up his clothes before pushing open the stone door and walking swiftly towards the outside world. Along with the young man's departure, Yi Xian's eyes narrowed slightly, and he fell into deep thought. Last night, he'd absorbed the young man's cultivation and barely opened up the Sumeru space before he withdrew a large amount of immortal pills and consumed them. Even though he'd relied on the energy of the immortal pills to stabilize his injuries, it would at least take a few years for him to recover his peak cultivation. Moreover, if a great enemy came during this period of time, then with his heavily injured body, it would definitely be extremely dangerous. Moreover, the 9 Radiance Immortal sect was an ordinary sect in the earthly immortal world, and it just happened to be his place of concealment. Yi Xian knew that he and Yang Jian were irreconcilable enemies. Yang Jian would absolutely not let him off, and he wouldn't let Yang Jian off as well. So, only one of them could survive. As the saying goes, caution is the parent of safety. Yang Jian was the #1 disciple of the 3rd generation of Chan school, and he had 12 golden immortals and senior and junior brothers. Every single one of them was an extraordinary figure in the heavens and the earth, whereas he was heavily injured now, so he absolutely couldn't reveal himself in the outside world. If Yang Jian's best friends wanted to annihilate him, then with his heavily injured body, how could he be a match for these people? Moreover, Yi Xian had an extremely great premonition that this old dog, the Jade Emperor, would definitely send someone to search for his whereabouts. If the Jade Emperor found out that he was heavily injured, then the Jade Emperor would definitely hit him while he was down. Endure. Yi Xian's eyes narrowed. For the time being, he would endure in the Jiuhua Immortal sect. With the immortal scripture that he cultivated, he would definitely be able to return to his peak in just a few years. Moreover, after the battle with Yang Jian, Yi Xian felt extremely pressured. If he hadn't used a trick to injure Yang Jian first, then even with the heaven-destroying halberd in his hand, he probably wouldn't have been Yang Jian's match. Cultivation, he had to increase his cultivation. This was the most important thing for him. So-called schemes and tricks were just small tricks. This time, both he and Yang Jian were heavily injured. Next time, Yang Jian wouldn't be so careless. Yang Jian, just you wait. The next time we meet, I'll make sure you die a horrible death. Yi Xian's eyes narrowed as a cold light flashed through them. He had already formulated a detailed plan in his mind. His intention to kill Yang Jian was as clear as day. First of all, Yi Xian knew that what he needed to do now was to heal his injuries. Only when his cultivation returned to its peak could he carry out his plan to increase his cultivation step by step. Chapter 266. The sun rose and the moon set, and the stars moved. Days passed, and half a year passed in the blink of an eye. Yi Xian's injuries improved day by day, and his cultivation recovered to the heavenly immortal realm. However, he was still very far from the grand unity mysterious immortal realm, and according to his estimation, it would take at least 2 more years. During this half a year of time, Yi Xian stayed within the young man's stone house, and it could be said that he'd truly not left his house. Besides consuming immortal pills and meditating every day, he had nothing else to do. Yi Xian refused to leave, and Li Jianglu was deeply afraid that someone would notice Yi Xian's existence. So he could be said to be absent-minded every day, and he was even unable to concentrate on his cultivation. Fortunately, Li Jianglu stayed at the labor peak. Even though there were many people here, they were all at the lowest level of the 9 Radiance Immortal sect. Besides completing the tiring labor every day, they would return to their residences to cultivate. So there was naturally no one that was bored to the point of coming to Li Jiangliu's residence to investigate. On this day, Yi Xian woke up from his cultivation, and he saw Li Jianglu pushing open the stone door in a dispirited manner. Not only were there some bruises on his face, there were even a few streaks of tears. Obviously, he'd suffered some sort of grievance. Unfortunately, Yi Xian didn't ask him about it, and his expression was indifferent as he continued to consume a medicinal pill and cultivate. On the other hand, the young man directly disregarded Yi Xian. He wiped the tears from the corners of his eyes, and then he sat cross-legged on a meditation cushion and entered into cultivation as well. In the beginning, the young man was very curious and asked about Yi Xian's origins. But along with the passage of time, the young man noticed that Yi Xian was an extremely cold and indifferent person. Besides speaking a few words with him after he woke up, Yi Xian paid no attention to him after that. Li Jianglu wasn't stupid. Conversely, he was extremely intelligent. He knew that Yi Xian was a cultivator, and his cultivation was definitely extraordinary. He intended to seek guidance from Yi Xian on the problems he faced in his cultivation, but Yi Xian paid no attention to him at all. So, the young man could only sigh helplessly and stop disturbing Yi Xian. Clang! 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 All of a sudden, 18 bell rings sounded out successively from the outside world, and it instantly caused the entire Haoshuan mountain to fall into chaos. Li Jianglu, who was in the midst of cultivation, quickly opened his eyes, and astonishment appeared on his face. He didn't dare be negligent as he hurriedly left his residence, and he raised his sword to fly towards the 9 Radiance Hall. Inside the stone house, Yi Xian frowned slightly. When her eyes turned, she saw a group of heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals heading towards the 9 Radiance Immortal sect. The person in the lead was Venus Tai Bai. Old Man Tai Bai actually came to this tiny 9 Radiance Immortal sect. Could it be that he noticed that I was hiding here to recuperate? Yi Xian frowned and said in a low voice, "That's not right. If he really knew that I was here, he would definitely report it directly to the Jade Emperor. How could he appear in front of these immortal cultivators? Yi Xian said with certainty, overturning his previous judgment. The crowd on 9 Radiance Peak was surging. With the 9 Radiance mysterious immortal in the lead, numerous elders stood at the side, and the tens of thousands of disciples behind him bowed, as they stood on 9 Radiance Peak, as if they were waiting for the arrival of a great figure. The 9 Radiance mysterious immortal was a black-clothed old man, and his cultivation was at the mysterious immortal realm. Even though he wasn't ranked among the immortals, he was still a loose immortal in the earthly immortal world, and he was free and unfettered, and wasn't restrained by the celestial court. However, the 9 Radiance mysterious immortal's heart was heavy today, and his eyes were slightly drifting. He truly couldn't understand why the 9 Radiance immortal sect that he established wasn't even worth mentioning in the earthly immortal world. So why would Venus Tai-Bai from the heaven dimension come here? The Jade Emperor of Virtuous Virtue, Supreme Haotian, has decreed. Venus Tai-Bai's body was covered in resplendent immortal light, and he naturally had the dignity of a great immortal of the celestial court. He spread out a golden decree in his hand and read it out in a clear voice. The content of the decree was very simple. It was just an announcement to some sects in the earthly immortal world that if anyone found Yi Xian's traces, regardless of whether he was alive or dead, as long as they reported to the celestial court, they would be heavily rewarded. Immortal elixirs, spirit herbs, cultivation techniques, and secret manuals could be said to be everything. As long as someone could report Yi Xian's whereabouts, the celestial court's rewards would be extremely generous. Venus Tai-Bai was also just going through the formalities. The 9 Radiance Immortal sect was just one of the major sects, and he had no idea that Yi Xian was actually hiding in the 9 Radiance Immortal sect. This is the appearance of the Demon Slayer Saint Lord. If you find him, you must report to the celestial court as soon as possible. Venus Tai-Bai said majestically. He threw out a void jade slip and led the heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals to the next sect. Farewell, immortal emissary. Jiahua Xianxian bowed to Venus Tai-Bai and lowered his posture to the extreme. At this moment, the stone in his heart quietly fell to the ground. As Venus Tai-Bai left, Jiahua Xianxian took out a jade slip, and a beam of immortal light rippled out. It directly revealed Yi Xian's appearance in the void. He looked back at the disciples and said, "This is the Demon Slayer Saint Lord. If you go down the mountain and find him, you must inform the sect immediately. We will definitely reward you handsomely." Senior brother, who is this Demon Slayer Saint Lord? He actually made the Jade Emperor issue a decree, and Venus Tai-Bai personally came down to the lower worlds to find him. You don't know this, right? Let me tell you, this Demon Slayer Saint Lord's real name is Yi Xian. A few days ago, he fought the war god of 3 realms, Yang Jian. He actually destroyed Yang Jian's physical body, and true spirit fled to the lower worlds. However, this Taoist Yi Xian didn't have it easy either. He was also severely injured and no one knows where he is now. If you ask me, the Earth Immortal realm is vast and boundless. Unless we were extremely lucky in our previous lives, how can we meet this Yi Xian? I heard that the Celestial Court even gave a 9 transformation golden pill to find this true cultivator Yi. This 9 transformation golden pill is a precious treasure in the Celestial Court. If a mortal consumes it, they can become immortals. I wonder who will be able to obtain this great fortune. The disciples of the 9 Radiance Immortal sect discussed successively, and it instantly became extremely noisy. However, no one noticed that the young man, Li Jianglu, stared fixedly at Yi Xian's appearance in the sky, and his entire body became extremely stunned. At this moment, Li Jiangliu's mind shook to the extreme, and his face flushed red to the extreme, because he was extremely sure that the appearance of this Taoist he'd saved was exactly the same as this Demon Slayer Saint Lord. No, it wasn't exactly the same, it was the same person. The young man Li Jianglu had an extremely great impulse at this moment. He really wanted to step out from the crowd and inform the 9 Radiance mysterious immortal about Yi Xian. However, he'd just taken a step forward when he sighed helplessly and didn't do it in the end. A 9 transformation golden pill, a cultivation technique, and being ranked among the immortals. All of these were Li Jiangliu's dreams. However, when he recalled Yi Xian's cold and indifferent appearance, he was completely able to sense that this true cultivator of the celestial court didn't want others to know that he was hiding in the 9 Radiance Immortal sect at all. Li Jiangliu was still a young man after all, and his thoughts were extremely pure and kind. Since he hadn't obtained Yi Xian's permission, it was better for him to not make a decision first. He intended to make a decision after he returned to his residence and asked for Yi Xian's opinion. The young man didn't know. Fortunately, he wasn't blinded by greed. If he really leaked Yi Xian's information, then only death would await him. Chapter 267. At the same time, Yi Xian was sitting cross-legged in the stone house. His face was expressionless, and no one could tell what he was thinking. However, the killing intent surrounding him was gradually fading away. Although Yi Xian had yet to recover from his serious injuries, he had now recovered to the level of a celestial immortal. His pair of Dharma eyes naturally saw this scene. This young man is quite interesting. Yi Xian smiled. His body gradually turned illusory and disappeared from the stone house. A full 2 hours passed. When young Li Jiangliu returned to his residence, he was slightly stunned when he found that there was no one in the stone house. Then, he shook his head and smiled bitterly. It seemed that perfected cultivator Yi knew that the celestial court was looking for him, and had left without saying goodbye. Although young Li Jiangliu was a little disappointed, knowing that he had lost a great opportunity, he was simple-minded and did not regret it too much. After all, he also knew that Yi Xian, a great immortal of the celestial court, would not care about a mortal like him. Behind the handyman peak, Yi Xian opened up a cave residence and then blocked it with a huge rock. He did not want anyone to disturb him this time. He would only come out of the cave residence after he recovered from his injuries. From this, it could be seen that Yi Xian was treading on thin ice when it came to cultivation. He would never put himself in danger. The sun rose and the moon set. The stars moved. Time was a merciless butcher's knife. For mortals, it was a sharp weapon that hastened their deaths. For immortal cultivators, it was also the motivation to move forward. 10 years was not a long time, but it was not short either. However, in the vast Earth immortal world, 10 years was just a blink of an eye. On this day, the sky was high and the clouds were light. A ray of sun rose from the east, illuminating the world. The cave residence where Yi Xian was in seclusion was covered with weeds. No one would have thought that such an earth-shattering figure was hidden in the cave residence. All of a sudden, bang! With a loud bang, the boulder blocking the entrance of the cave exploded. A beam of tiny immortal light rippled out from the cave, and a slender figure slowly walked out. Yi Xian was dressed in a black Taoist robe, with tiny celestial light surrounding his body. His black hair fell behind his head, and when he opened and closed his eyes, tiny celestial light flowed in his eyes. Wherever his gaze passed, the void would be slightly distorted. Yi Xian stretched out his arms and breathed in the morning glow. The tiny celestial light around him slowly dissipated. He no longer had any power, as if he had turned into an ordinary person. I didn't expect that this seclusion would take 10 years. Yi Xian sighed. 10 years ago, Yi Xian had sealed himself in the cave residence. However, now that his cultivation had recovered to its peak, this favor must be repaid. Servant Peak. The sound of gongs, drums, and firecrackers rang in the sky. Every stone house had a large Shi character pasted on it. Thousands of servant disciples were toasting and cheering from time to time. There were a total of 99 peaks in the Haoshuan mountain. The servant peak was only one of them. The other 98 peaks were also holding banquets. This made the entire Zhuhua immortal sect extremely lively. Yi Xian walked slowly through the sky, and no one was able to notice his tracks. Up until he arrived before the stone house that Li Jiangliu resided in, he noticed that spiderwebs had already formed on the stone door. Obviously, no one had lived in this stone house for many years. Yi Xian frowned lightly. As his palm flicked through the sky, he directly restrained a servant disciple. Before this servant could let out a sharp cry, Yi Xian shot a strand of immortal light into the space between this person's brows, and then he executed a soul-searching technique to directly read this person's memories. After an entire few tens of breaths of time, Yi Xian slowly opened his eyes. He'd already understood the cause and effect of this matter, and he casually struck out with a strand of immortal light that directly transformed this servant disciple into ash. After that, he walked slowly through the sky towards 9 Radiance Peak. From the memories of this servant disciple, Yi Xian obtained some information about Li Jianglu. After he left all those years ago, this young man had broken through to the nascent soul realm 2 years later, and he'd even won the championship in the outer court disciple competition in one go, and was directly taken into the inner court. Yi Xian wasn't surprised that the young man had broken through to the nascent soul realm, because when he was recuperating all those years ago, the immortal pills he consumed weren't able to be completely absorbed, and some impurities were expelled from his body. So this naturally benefited this young man. However, according to the memories of this servant disciple, after Li Jianglu entered the inner court, he wasn't as glorious as he'd imagined, and he suffered an unimaginable calamity on the 5th year. Not only was his cultivation crippled, he'd even been reduced to the lowest medicine slave on 9 Radiance Peak. Today was the day that exalted immortal Jiuhua's daughter was getting married, so the various peaks had held banquets and created such a joyous scene. Yi Xian didn't feel much sympathy towards the young man's encounter, nor did he feel pity in his heart, because every single person walked their own path. Yi Xian only wanted to repay the young man's life-saving grace and give the young man a fortuitous encounter before leaving the Jiuhua immortal sect. He didn't think about anything else besides this. Chapter 268. 9 Radiance Peak. It was a hubbub of voices, and it was extremely festive. There were thousands of cultivators shuttling back and forth. The 9 Radiance Hall at the center was even filled with people, and congratulatory voices resounded from time to time. Today was the day of the marriage of the 9 Radiance Profound Immortal, and it could be said to be a grand occasion for the 9 Radiance Immortal sect. All the cultivation sects in the surroundings naturally came to congratulate them. The 9 Radiance Profound Immortal was laughing heartily as he welcomed and sent off his fellow Taoists. Speaking of the 9 Radiance Profound Immortal, his true form was a goshawk. He took 1,000 years to transform, and 10,000 years to attain the Tao. He believed in the Tao teachings of the Jie school. Even though the Jie school had already declined, a skinny camel was still bigger than a horse, and not everyone could afford to offend the Jie school. This allowed the 9 Radiance Profound Immortal to establish his Tao teachings and establish a sect in the 500,000 kilometers Haoshuan mountain. He even got married and had children, so he could be considered to be free and unfettered. The wind was calm, and the clouds were untainted by dust. Yi Xian walked through the void, and the scene on 9 Radiance Peak entered his eyes. He could be said to have no interest in these low-level cultivators. If he really did have some interest, it would be because the 9 Radiance Profound Immortal was able to enter his eyes. It wasn't that the 9 Radiance Profound Immortal was very strong, but only the 9 Radiance Profound Immortal had entered the immortal realm amongst these cultivators. If he swallowed the 9 Radiance Profound Immortal's Tao fruit, he would be able to improve his cultivation. Since the battle with Yang Jian, Yi Xian had completely realized the inadequacy of his cultivation. There was no need to think about immortal pills, as he didn't have the fortune to enjoy them. The only way to quickly improve his cultivation was to execute the Tribulation Transcender technique and devour the Tao fruit of others. Yi Xian's eyes narrowed slightly while a wisp of bloody light flashed through his eyes from time to time. His gaze towards the 9 Radiance Profound Immortal revealed traces of killing intent. However, Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and didn't make a move in the end. After all, he'd come to look for Li Jianglu, and it wouldn't be too late to annihilate the 9 Radiance Profound Immortal after he repaid this kid's kindness. Yi Xian made a decision in his heart. In the pill pavilion of the Jiuhua Hall, the earth and fire burned fiercely, and the cauldron sizzled. Below the cauldron, a red-robed Taoist was performing hand seals, and he was constantly putting some spirit herbs into the cauldron. There were also 2 herb slaves waving their wind and fire fans. Clearly, they were concocting a cauldron of pills. Turn on the stove. As soon as the red-robed Taoist finished speaking, the 2 medicine slaves didn't dare to be negligent. They worked together to lift the lid of the pill furnace. A fragrant smell drifted out from the pill furnace. The red-robed Taoist was overjoyed. He waved his hand in the air, and a dozen pills were sucked toward him. Good, good, good. This concentrated fragrance pill has a round color and a nice aroma. It seems like the refinement this time was very successful. The red-robed Taoist observed the pill in his hand, and his face lit up with joy. Test the medicine. The red-robed Taoist's smile disappeared. His voice was filled with malice, as he threw a pill at a medicine slave. The medicine slave trembled as he caught it. Bang! The medicine slave's body trembled like a sieve. He suddenly knelt down in front of the red-robed Taoist and begged in a trembling voice. Grand Master, please spare my life. This concentrated fragrance pill is a highly toxic substance that can harm the foundation of evil people. Before the medicine slave could finish begging, the red-robed Taoist said with a gloomy expression, Could it be that you want me to feed you? Or do you want your soul to disperse here? All right, I'll consume this pill for him. Suddenly, the other medicine slave spoke with a flat voice. He directly seized the concentrated fragrance pill from this medicine slave and swallowed it. The entire process seemed to be extremely calm. Good, good, good. The red-robed Taoist stroked his beard and roared with laughter when he saw this scene. Jianglu, I wonder what fortuitous encounter you obtained. You're able to survive after consuming 100 types of poison. You can be considered to be a treasure of our 9 Radiance Immortal sect. Big brother Jianglu, thank you, thank you. The medicine slave ceaselessly kowtowed to Li Jianglu while his face carried an extremely grateful expression. If it wasn't for Li Jianglu consuming this medicinal pill for him, then he would probably suffer an extremely miserable fate. Grand Master, Jianglu has a request. After 10 years, the young man from before had vanished, and Li Jianglu had transformed into a young man. However, his eyes were withered and lifeless while his entire body emanated a dispirited aura. It was as if everything in the world didn't matter to him anymore. However, at this moment, Li Jianglu's eyes glowed with a wisp of hope, and he was looking at the red-robed Taoist with a pleading gaze. This caused the red-robed Taoist to frown slightly. Obviously, he knew what Li Jianglu wanted to ask of him. Jianglu, you've already followed me for 5 years, and you've even tested medicine for me for 5 years. It can be said that your contributions are great. However, you must know that you've committed a crime, and the sect master has even ordered you to not leave this pill pavilion. I'm unable to agree to your request. As he gazed at Li Jianglu's dim and lifeless eyes, the red-robed Taoist was deeply afraid that Li Jianglu would seek death. After that, he patted Li Jianglu on the shoulder and consoled him. Jianglu, even though you've committed a great mistake all those years ago, so long as you properly test medicine for me, I'll definitely assist you in recovering your cultivation 100 years from now. I'll also plead with the sect master to take you back into the sect. You don't have to be a lowly medicine slave in this pill pavilion. Grand Master, today is the day of senior sister Kair's wedding. I only want to see her one last time. Please grant my wish. Li Jianglu knelt and kowtowed as he spoke with a sorrowful voice. Humph. The red-robed Taoist's expression changed when he saw how tactless Li Jianglu was, and he said coldly, Li Jianglu, don't go too far. Kair's wedding today is a great matter of my 9 Radiance Immortal sect. If I let you out of this pill pavilion, wouldn't I be punished by the sect master? There's no need to say anything else. I won't agree to it. The red-robed Taoist flicked his sleeve and left. His attitude was extremely cold and fierce. If it wasn't for the fact that Li Jianglu still had some use, he wouldn't pay any attention to such an extremely lowly medicine slave. Within the pill pavilion, a row of clear tears flowed from Li Jianglu's eyes as he sat on the ground in a daze. On the other hand, the medicine slave by his side consoled softly. Big brother Jianglu, this is our fate. You should accept it. Ha 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 ha. Suddenly, Li Jianglu roared with laughter. and as he laughed, tears flowed from his eyes. He muttered, "Fate? If that great immortal from all those years ago was able to take me as his disciple, then how could I, Li Jianglu, take this tiny 9 radiance immortal sect seriously?" As he gazed at Li Jianglu's insane appearance, the medicine slave sighed and said, "Big brother Jianglu, quickly wake up. You've already mentioned it countless times in the past few years. If you've really saved the life of an immortal, then how could you have fallen to such an extent? You don't believe me?" Li Jianglu laughed hysterically and said, "Do you know why I'm still working hard to live? Because I believe he'll come back for me. I believe he'll come back for me." Li Jianglu seemed to have gone mad, and he seemed to have fallen into some sort of obsession. This caused the medicine slave by his side to sigh helplessly, and he felt that Li Jianglu's mind had already developed some problems after testing medicines for so many years. Space surged while ripples spread out. Yi Xian took a step forward and silently watched Li Jianglu. From the beginning until the end, he'd witnessed Li Jianglu's encounter, but there wasn't much fluctuation in his heart. Chapter 269. Every single person walked their own path. It was either good or bad, sad or miserable. Some stood proudly in the 9 heavens while others were lowly like ants. It was also Yi Xian's sudden appearance that caused the expressions of the herb servant and Li Jianglu to change drastically. However, when Li Jianglu saw Yi Xian's appearance, his entire body was instantly stunned on the spot, and his body couldn't help but tremble. "I'll repay the kindness of all those years ago today. Come with me." Yi Xian spoke calmly in a carefree manner that wasn't tainted by dust. Who are you?" The herb servant spoke with astonishment. Bang! Suddenly, Li Jianglu knelt on the ground and ceaselessly kowtowed to Yi Xian, while tears flowed out from his eyes without end, and even his voice was trembling to the extreme. "True monarch, I knew you would return." As he gazed at Li Jianglu's trembling body, Yi Xian's expression was calm, and he said in a low voice, "I must repay the kindness of saving my life. This is the good karma between us, and I've specially come today to repay this kindness." His palm and fingers flicked through the air, and it transformed into a shadow. Yi Xian struck out with a strand of immortal light that covered Li Jianglu's body, and he was already prepared to bring this kid away. "True monarch, please be merciful and take him away with you," Li Jianglu pleaded loudly to Yi Xian, and the herb servant instantly came to an understanding. He ceaselessly kowtowed to Yi Xian and begged Yi Xian to save him. Unfortunately, Yi Xian's expression remained unchanged, and he said calmly, "I've come to take you away today because I owe you a favor. As for the life and death of others, what does it have to do with me?" Yi Xian struck out with immortal light, and instantly brought Li Jianglu along to vanish from the pill pavilion. On the other hand, what Li Jianglu didn't know was that after the two of them vanished, the herb servant's expression turned gloomy, while his fists were clenched tightly, and his eyes were filled with extreme unwillingness and rage. "This won't do. Li Jianglu was saved, so the martial ancestor will definitely be furious. Without Li Jianglu blocking the medicine for me, I'm afraid I won't be able to live for 3 days." The medicine servant spoke with a trembling voice. Then, he quickly knocked on the door of the pill pavilion, hoping to summon the red-robed Taoist and tell him that Li Jianglu had been rescued. On 9 Radiance Peak, Yi Xian's body was enveloped in immortal light as he strolled through space. Li Jianglu followed closely behind him under his guidance, and when he saw the wedding banquet below, a wisp of sorrow appeared in his eyes. "True monarch, please wait for a moment. This disciple wishes to see senior sister Kai one last time," Li Jianglu pleaded with a trembling voice. When he heard Li Jianglu's words, Yi Xian frowned slightly and said, "It's the love between a man and a woman again. How boring. Since you want to make a final farewell, I'll fulfill your wish." Yi Xian sat cross-legged in the air without saying a word. However, when his eyes opened and closed, a trace of indifference flashed past them. Yi Xian had searched through the memories of the odd-job disciple Kaier that Li Jianglu spoke of, so he naturally had some understanding of this woman. Kaier was the daughter of a 9 Radiance profound immortal. Her talent in cultivation was ordinary, but her appearance was extremely beautiful. She could be said to be a rare beauty. Moreover, it wasn't strange that Li Jianglu was infatuated with her. Li Jianglu bowed towards Yi Xian gratefully, and then he stood silently by Yi Xian's side as he waited for the appearance of his sweetheart. With Yi Xian by his side and his technique covering the sky, no one noticed their existence. 2 hours later, a pair of newlyweds walked out from the Nine Radiance Hall amidst the sounds of firecrackers. Ying Kaier wore a wedding robe with 9 phoenixes. Her skin was fair and moist, and every frown and smile of hers was breathtaking. Beside her was a valiant young man in the attire of a bridegroom. He was holding Lu Kaier's hand as he thanked the guests that had come. Why Yin Yunfei? Why is it him? Li Jiangliu's face instantly turned ghastly pale when he saw such a scene. He clenched his fists tightly while he gnashed his teeth to the point they creaked. His gaze towards Yin Yunfei was filled with extreme hatred. 5 years ago, it was Yin Yunfei who'd crippled his cultivation during the sect competition. After that, a string of inconceivable events occurred, and he was punished by the sect and sent to the Pill Pavilion to become a lowly medicine slave. Li Jianglu had never imagined that the woman he loved the most would actually marry his enemy. Why? Senior Sister Kaier, why did you marry him? Li Jianglu muttered in a sorrowful manner, while his eyes were filled with extreme unwillingness. Yi Xian smiled in disdain as he looked at Li Jiangliu's dejected appearance. Another pedantic person that's trapped by love. It looks like Li Jianglu still doesn't understand that his current state was greatly related to this woman. You've saved my life, so I can grant you a wish. I can give you everything you want. Yi Xian spoke calmly. What do I want? Li Jianglu was stunned as he muttered. A supreme cultivation, a woman you love, and the reverence everyone in the Nine Radiance Immortal sect has for you. But I have to tell you that you only have this one chance. I hope you can consider it carefully. Once I've returned your kindness, there'll be nothing between us anymore. Whether you live or die in the future has nothing to do with me. Yi Xian spoke tirelessly and left the choice in Li Jiangliu's hands. As for how Li Jianglu chose, it was entirely up to him. Li Jiangliu's face flushed red when he heard Yi Xian, and he really wanted to agree. However, when he saw Yi Xian's unfathomable eyes, he swallowed the words that were just about to leave his mouth, because he saw a trace of disappointment and disdain in Yi Xian's eyes. This caused Li Jiangliu's excited heart to calm down completely. It was as if there was a voice in the unseen world telling him that if he really chose in this way, then he would probably live in regret for his entire lifetime. As he looked at Li Jianglu, who remained silent, Yi Xian smiled indifferently, and then a speck of immortal light pointed at Li Jianglu. It instantly enveloped Li Jianglu within it, and then an unimaginably terrifying force filled Li Jiangliu's extraordinary meridians. This strand of immortal energy can help you conceal yourself, and it'll even allow you to possess the strength of 3 heavenly immortals. Even a 9 Radiance mysterious immortal won't be able to notice your existence. If you've made up your mind, then come look for me on Heaven's End Peak. Yi Xian glanced deeply at Li Jianglu before his entire body vanished in space. On Heaven's End Peak, Yi Xian sat cross-legged while looking at Li Jianglu, who stood in the distance, and he said with a strange voice, "What a petty and stupid love. Don't disappoint me." Actually, Yi Xian was entirely capable of bestowing Li Jianglu with a fortuitous encounter before drifting off into the distance. From then on, the two of them would have no relationship at all. However, Li Jianglu gave Yi Xian a very different feeling. This feeling was extremely familiar, and when he tried hard to recall, the appearance of a familiar person appeared in his mind. Yi Xian noticed to his astonishment that this kid was actually extremely similar to Fatso Huang. They both had a petty and lowly love. However, Fatso Huang had transformed into an extremely evil person in the end, whereas Li Jianglu hadn't transformed. Yi Xian had a feeling that perhaps Li Jianglu would be of great use to him, and it would depend on whether Li Jianglu was able to transform today. This was also a test that Yi Xian had given him. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.